Very much for joining us here for our regular meeting Tuesday, August 11th of the City Council. I now call the meeting to order. And at this point, we will stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you very much again for coming, for joining us electronically for our regular meeting for August. We have a nice full agenda this evening and looking forward to, I would expect a few more folks to join us as we go. But we will begin with city business and approval of the agenda. So at this point, we have our agenda set, consent and discussion action agenda. Any comments or requests to change from the council? Seeing none, any public comment on the agenda? Hearing none, can we have a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll make a motion that we approve the agenda.
I'll second.
First from Grover, second from West. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Excellent. So the agenda is approved as written. The next thing is we have our minutes from July 14th meeting to discuss any substantive changes for the minutes from our July meeting. Any councilor comments regarding the minutes from July? Hearing or seeing none, any comments from the public regarding the minutes as, as presented in the packet?
Anita Thompson does.
Okay, Anita, go ahead.
Yeah, it might be a question and an addition, but I'm not sure, so I'm just going to bring it up. It's regarding the item number 5, discussion decision regarding water main placement for Van Wyck. It's regarding this the second sentence on page 4. It's when it states that the water main on Edwards is 4 inches and out of service water main on Van Wyck is 6 inches. Shouldn't it be vice versa, meaning that it's 6 inches for the water main on Edwards, 4 inches on the water main on Van Wyck?
Gabe, Eli, I know we don't have Public Works with us, but can you weigh in on that? I'm not able to answer that.
I'm going to default. I defer to Eli. I'm not sure.
Okay. Yeah, it's 6 inches on Edwards.
Yeah, it doesn't read that.
Yeah, and the 4 inches is the one on Van Wyck that's going to be routed onto Edwards, and it'll also be 6 inches, the new add-on.
So that needs to be corrected in the minutes, because that's not what it reads. And then it would also have to be corrected on 5, states that it's.
Eli, this is Patrick Sullivan from GHD. May I make a comment?
Yes, Patrick, go ahead.
So I think that is incorrect. From what I understand from the as-built plan set, that there's a 6-inch line that comes down Edwards and then branches down Van Wyck. That is the line that has been taken out of service down Van Wyck. There is a parallel 4-inch line that goes down Edwards and down Galindo. That's the currently active line. So I do not believe it is a 6-inch line that goes down Edwards and Galindo.
Okay, I think because we just want to make sure that we are correct on this, if we can bring this back to the consent agenda for next meeting, just to make sure that we have our information correct. Does the council approve of that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Anita, for bringing that to our attention, and we will review with Public Works exactly what we have running down Edwards and Galindo. Does that work?
And the only, of course, and the only reason why I brought it up is because I thought that was one of the issues of why the water flow was so low. There was a low flow was because it was a 4-inch water main on Van Wyck and not a 6-inch. That's why I brought it up.
No, it's worthy to, we want to make sure we're representing what's really going on there. So thanks for bringing that to our attention. Any other comments from council or public regarding the minutes from the July meeting? All right, hearing and seeing no comments, do we have a motion to approve the minutes with the intent of coming back to, actually, we're not going to approve it, sorry. We're going to table this and bring it to the consent agenda for our following meeting in, what month are we? In September. So we will table this minutes until.
Steve, this is Patrick Sullivan from GHD. I'm looking at the as-built plan sets right now. It is the as-built plan sets that Public Works has show that it's a 6-inch line that is broken going down Van Wyck, and that it shows a 4-inch parallel line down Edwards. So what I said earlier is correct, and I think the way it was presented originally was correct. So,
Oh, okay.
so and I'm looking right now at the as-built plan. So.
Well, then that's what we would do is look at those plans. And so seeing that we have a confirmation that the information in the minutes are correct, do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make that motion that we approve the minutes.
I'll second.
First by Grover, second by West. All those in favor?
Aye.
And I know that Tom Davies is having connectivity issues. Tom, are you able to hear this? And if so, can you call in with your phone to the meeting? I want to take just a brief, what would this be? This would be a media timeout if we still had professional sports to make sure that we have Tom connected. Let me text him back.
Can you guys tell me where we are on the agenda? I've been off for the last 10 minutes. This is Tom Davies.
So it sounds like you have your connection back up, Tom. So we just discussed the minutes from the July meeting.
Okay.
And there was a comment from Anita about the details of the lines, the 6-inch and 4-inch line, and Patrick Sullivan just looked at the specs, and those figures are correct. So we just approved the minutes.
Okay.
Do you have any substantive changes that you wanted to make to the minutes?
I do not. Thank you.
Okay, so we are back on point. And Tom, please text me if you lose connection again, and we'll try to figure an alternate plan.
Will do.
All right, so moving on to council reports and committee assignments. Let's start with Mr. West. Do you have any council reports for us?
Nothing this month.
Excellent. Mr. Grover?
Yeah, I have a couple things. I'd like to announce my candidacy for November 3rd election. I'd like to keep this seat. I feel like I've had enough experience here that I can really get some things going and really address some of the city issues here. So I will be putting up a website too with my platform in the near future, and I'll go through Gabe and Eli or somebody and work that out, how people can see what I'm about from that. I had the opportunity to take the e-course for the government to government or government to tribal meetings, brought by the mayor and Shirley. Somehow I got that link, so I was able to take that, and that was very informative, and it brought up a lot of things about Native American water rights that I had the opportunity to experience at HSU. I got to go for the Redwood Coast Energy Authority. It seems how Councilmember Miller is no longer. I took his place as on the board of directors there and took their orientation, which was very informative. I'm also on an ad hoc committee with them for racial equity. So I have a lot going on there, and energy procurement is one of my main things, and I'm working on that for the city too. So I'm getting more involved with the feasibility of our own energy independence. So that's one of the biggest pieces of the puzzle I'm trying to put together. So that's about it for right now, and the rest of my comments will be during the agenda discussions.
Excellent. Mr. Davies, do you have any reports for us?
I do not. Thank you.
Mr. Klompus? You are on mute, sir.
How about now?
You're perfect.
Okay, fine. I completed all my onboarding activities, my Form 700, my ethics courses. I've reached out to all the different council members. I've met with the Rancheria shortly. I'm trying to meet with the Churai Ancestral Society. I've done a number of things to make sure that people know who I am so that I can be more active on the council. So following a discussion, Mr. Mayor, I have to have with you about committee assignments, because I want to make sure I get that down and I can begin to support the council.
That's a great question or a great comment. So Eli and Gabe, if you can put a note to discuss council assignments at the next council meeting in September, and we can make sure that we're all covered.
Thank you.
And I don't have anything to report. I was unable to attend the Humboldt Transit Authority this month, and Redwood Region did not meet. Economic Development did not meet, so nothing to report there. So thank you very much, Council. At this point, we'll move on to staff reports, starting with Mr. Naffa.
Okay. First of all, I was going to check and just see if Lieutenant Kevin Miller is on the phone. So if you are, speak out, and then we'll let you do a report. Otherwise, I can get started. So there's a slurry seal project which will impact Parker, Edwards, Hector, Galindo, and Van Wyck, and that's scheduled to start on Monday, the 17th of August. And then we also have a town hall solar project. The proposals for the solar project are due September 3rd. And this next week on Wednesday, is a sea level rise discussion put on by the Coastal Cities Group of the League of California Cities. So if any council members are interested, let me know. And then also in October, the 7th, 8th, and 9th will be the League of California Cities Conference. This is their annual conference, normally held in Long Beach, but this year will be virtually held. So we will be joining that, and any council members who want to join along with some staff members, let me know. That is October 7th, 8th, and 9th. Okay, Lieutenant Miller, I don't hear you, so I'm assuming you're not on. So I'll turn it back to Steve.
Any questions for Eli from the council? I do have one. If we could see the water use, the water production and water use reports back in the staff report, if we could see that every month, just to make sure that we're not missing large losses of water, sudden losses of water, that would be great.
Okay, that'll be fine.
All right. Any other staff reports? Gabe, do you have anything for us this evening?
No, I don't, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. At this point, then, I'm going to move to the items from the floor, and I just want to read this to make sure I cover it. At this time, members of the public may comment on items not appearing on the agenda. Individual comments will be limited to 3 minutes or less. Comments should be directed to the council as a whole and not to individual council members or staff. Council and staff responses will be minimal for non-agenda items. At this point, I'd like to open it up to items from the floor, and we'll go through folks who are logged into WebEx first, and then I see a couple of phone numbers. We'll reach out to you after that, so make sure that I get that. I'm also going to put my phone number in the chat. If someone is having a hard time getting our attention, you can certainly text me, and we'll try to make sure that every voice is heard. But at this point, I offer items from the floor.
Anita Thompson.
Go ahead, Anita.
Sure. Thank you. On June 23rd, the City Council approved 2 fire hydrant replacements and awarded the bid to Wallen Construction. And then at the June 23rd meeting, it was my understanding that the fire hydrants would be replaced within a couple of weeks. However, it did not happen. And then at the following City Council meeting on July 14th, a question was asked, when would these fire hydrants be replaced? The council stated that the fire hydrants would be replaced within 2 weeks of this meeting, which would have been July 28th. It's August 11th, and the fire hydrants still haven't been replaced. When are these 2 fire hydrants going to be replaced? Thank you.
They will be replaced starting the day after Labor Day. The contractor, Walland, has the technician that normally does the fire hydrants is in Ukiah on a project. And we chose to have that particular person do it because we know that they're experienced in doing it. So they will be here the day after Labor Day.
Thank you.
I do want to note, Mayor, so for our first agenda item, the Van Wyck Bicycle Pedestrian and Connectivity Project update and discussion, I just want to make it clear to the public that we will not be addressing the Van Wyck Trail as part of that because that's not part of the project. So if anyone has any comments regarding the Van Wyck Trail, they can feel free to do them now.
Very good. Mr. Miller, you're on mute, sir.
Unmuted. Okay. I see the agenda has been set up in such a way that comments on the trail itself are not part of the proposed connectivity project, but I have a couple of things to say. The staff report notes that the staff engaged with 21 stakeholders at 2 meetings. That's number one. Number 2, that Vista points are planned on Van Wyck at either point end of the slump trail, and that stabilizing utilities, including the gravity storm drain pipe, are planned across the failed section. So here are my concerns, and I'm just going to read them within the 3 minutes allowed here. A stakeholder includes someone who has some consistent interest in the trail. How many trail user residents were at the stakeholder meetings? That's a question that I pose. It, of course, need not be answered because this is items from the floor. For the abandonment of a major trail, who represented the trail users at the stakeholder meetings? And I'm asking that we have another stakeholder meeting with outreach to trail using stakeholders. Second item. The use of Edward Street in front of view blocking houses and with nearby traffic is completely different experience from the present trail. We need another meeting to fully debate Edwards Walkway experience versus a Van Wyck Walkway, where regular walkers are in attendance, because I'm speaking now for walkers, and much of the discussion that's been made that I've heard has not discussed the trail use themselves, because the Edwards Walkway is not the same as the Van Wyck Walkway. Number 3, the proposed vista points at each end of the slumping trail will not be used. These people will not walk down that long driveway to look at that viewpoint. There are other viewpoints around in order to hike back up. This just won't be used. It's the SOP to the project. Number 4, the decision to continue with utilities in the trail-wide right-of-way is very wise, but the inclusion of a pedestrian bridge has not really been considered or discussed. The engineer said, oh, it's not a good idea. but it wasn't really evaluated as considering a double-use bridge, which would be walkers, where you wouldn't have to deal with the slumping soil underneath. And it's the same solution that you're offering for utilities, which will have an ugly utility bridge being designed as part of this project. And number 5, a well-known problem with Trinidad decision-making is non-participation by residents. And we've already discussed how important it is to reach out. We're planning on doing that as a city much more, and it should have been done much more before the January 14th decision, when very few people were watching. Very few people attended. And the major emotional comments were made by non-residents, and the weight of decision-making at that January 14th affected a huge number of people who weren't really aware that that decision was being made. I'm asking that we have broader discussion with a well-attended and informed meeting. It's going to make it much more difficult for the councilors, and I really understand the position you're in because I've been there many times. But this was not a well-informed decision in January. It was a very narrow decision based on an emotional experience. And I recognize that there's been attempts with stakeholders to deal with it in a very difficult time for you, Mayor, and the other members of the stakeholder group. But the stakeholders did not really involve a significant number of trail users. Those are the stakeholders of a trail. Thank you.
And thank you very much, Mr. Miller. And also another comment I want to make, just to make sure that everyone is aware, and your public engagement comment is what drives this, is that next week we have a meeting of both the Trails Committee and the Planning Commission, which are two places where this sort of information really can be discussed in a very concerted effort. And so I really encourage folks to show up next week at the Trails Committee or send Trails Committee comments if you're not able to attend in person. So please just know that that is already in place, and we forgot to mention it before items from the floor. Certainly not trying to squash anyone from making comments regarding this, but do know that that is available to us next week as well. So at this point, other items from the floor.
May I pose one quick question?
Yes, sir.
Will that Trails decision meeting be discussing the Van Wyck Trail, or will the Van Wyck Trail be moot by tonight's decision?
No, that is for discussion next week.
Thank you.
Yeah, and let me add also, so next week during the Trails Committee meeting, and then also regarding the Planning Commission meeting, they're talking about the temporary closure of the Van Wyck Trail, which we currently have it closed. It's part of the Coastal Commission process. And although this project does not have the trail included in it with the Caltrans funds, at a later date, we do want to address the trail and address what the community is looking for and find out if there is a viable solution that would work with both the Churai, the neighboring property owners, and the city residents as a whole.
All right, other items from the floor at this point. And David, I'll come back to you.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
this is Dick Bruce, 780 Underwood Drive in Trinidad. Another item from the floor concerning the Van Wyck Trail. I want to second Dwight Miller's comments that the stakeholders meetings that have been held have not really involved all the stakeholders, that trail users, city residents other than the adjacent property owners have not been allowed into those meetings. And I think it's important that the city residents and trail users be recognized as stakeholders in this issue. Last week, when Mr. Grover was out collecting signatures for running for council, he mentioned that there was going to be a meeting that afternoon of concerned stakeholders concerning the Van Wyck Trail connectivity project. I looked on the city's website. There was absolutely nothing there. I called the city clerk, and and he indicated that it was basically it's for neighboring residents. I had no ability at that time to make any comments regarding it. I consider myself to be a stakeholder. My wife and I have used that trail for 40 years. And so I think it's really important that other people that are residents of town and trail users be considered as stakeholders when these meetings are held. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dick. David, did you want to comment quickly?
Yes, I just kind of wanted to add the same thing that they've been saying too. As the person who lives right here, the person who owns the property was not able to access that meeting too, and she's you know, it was very important to her. And I also wanted to put out there, as for the designs and that, I'm always here and I'm willing to walk out there and talk to people. I have some pretty intense cliffside construction experience myself, so I'm, you know, trying to work with people too, but the access has to be a little more available to, I guess is the general consensus. So that's all.
Very good. And just as a reminder, folks, that we're not making any decisions tonight, that we are reaching out to different groups. And so, you know, we are constrained by COVID not being able to join together in one large meeting. So we're taking this in smaller chunks. And in no way are we trying to keep anybody out. So thank you very much for your comments regarding stakeholders and the inclusion of all stakeholders. So at this point, other items from the floor that people wish to share. All right, there are a couple of people that are on the phone. I don't know how to do this because you can unmute yourselves when you're calling in.
I can unmute one of them one at a time if you'd like. This is City Clerk.
Yeah, that'd be fine. I know one of them is Tom, who's called in with the phone and also dialed in with the WebEx. And so one of the 845 numbers is Tom, but how about the 677 number? I see 3 numbers so far.
I'll unmute the 677.
Any comments from our items from the floor from our 677 caller? Okay, hearing none. Let's just go for the next 845 number. It might be Tom.
Okay, here we go. Unmute.
I'm an 845 number.
That's you, Tom. Okay.
You know how to how do I unmute?
I'll just leave you on unmuted.
Thank you.
There we go. And then the other 845 number.
Here we go. We're unmuted.
Hi, this is Sarah Lindgren O'Connor from the Cherry Ancestral Society.
Hello, Sarah.
I didn't have any comments though.
Okay, but now we know who the second 845 number is. So thanks for letting us know. Gabe, hopefully you can keep track of those because they're right next to each other on my screen. So
I think we've got just, I think for clarity, I think we have 2 mute options. The caller can mute themselves and then I can mute from as a host. So why don't I leave those callers on unmuted and they can mute themselves and then they can chime in at any time.
very good. Okay, so we are moving on then. So thank you for the items from the floor. At this point, we'll move on to the consent agenda. All matters on the consent agenda are considered routine by the City Council and are enacted in one motion. There's no separate discussion of any of these items. If discussion is requested by any council member, that item is removed from the calendar, but we've already discussed the agenda for tonight. A single opportunity for public comment on the consent agenda is available to the public. At this point, I'd like to open it up to the public to see if there are any comments regarding the consent agenda. All right, hearing none, we'll bring it back to the council. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the consent agenda. Richard?
Second.
First with Compass, second with Grover. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye, Davies.
Very good. Okay, we have approval of the consent agenda. Thank you very much. I do have a comment from Mr. Pease that the audio and video quality of this meeting is making it impossible to follow. I know that I work in Trinidad during the day and have connectivity issues. A lot of it is turning the video off, but I don't see very many people with video on. But I would ask people to consider anyway turning their video off until they wish to speak, and that sometimes can free up some of the data that's flowing through our lines here. So hopefully that will help everyone have a better connection. All right, moving on. We will start with our first discussion action agenda item. Number 1 is discussion decision regarding the Van Wyck Trail Connectivity Project, revised design concept. And so just to be clear, that we are talking about the entire project, and that we invite and encourage participation at the Trails meeting or the Planning Commission as the agenda items roll out to discuss the section of the trail that we call the Van Wyck Trail, but this project is called the Van Wyck Connectivity Project. So please understand the distinction and that we are going to continue to try to seek feedback from as many people as possible. And with that, though, I do want to turn this over to Trevor. Oh, go ahead, Richard.
I'm sorry. I wanted to make a comment on the police report. I wasn't sure what time to do that. I just need
that's
1
during
minute.
the consent agenda. So we've already approved the agenda, but we can reopen it up if you have a substantive comment to make to change it, or is this a question for clarification?
No, it's really a clarification.
Okay.
I want to change it. The point that I want to make is that there's been some comments about increasing police attendance presence in Trinidad. And I asked Gabe to contact Margaret Gunderson at the HCSO office, who perhaps could give us an analysis of whether or not we're having increased police activity month by month compared to 6 months or a year ago or 2 years ago, to see where the trend is. In other words, if people feel they want more police presence, what does the data show? Are we having more activities, more police calls, more issues that need to be addressed? So I just wanted to report that hopefully in the future, we'll be able to get a report back from the HCSO office about where the trends are for Trinidad. That was my only comment. Thank you.
Okay. We can certainly follow up with we can add some detail to our staff report that we get on a monthly basis and see if we can reach out for that. So thanks for that comment. Moving back then to our discussion decision item regarding the Van Wyck Trail. If we could, I'd like to turn this over to Trevor.
And if I could intercede, yes, Steve, if I could intercede. We also have Patrick Sullivan from GHD, and we do have Trevor from SHN, and we do have Becky Price Hall from city staff. They're all on the line, so they can all contribute. But I think we could get started with GHD and Patrick, and then have Trevor and Becky fill in whatever additional items.
Thank you for that clarification.
Okay, turn it over to Patrick then.
Good evening. This is Patrick from GHD, and I had a couple of slides to share. I was going to talk specifically about the utility, the options for, or an option for dealing with the utilities in the slumping part of the Van Wyck Trail reach. So, Gabe, can we pull up the slideshow? Can we pull it up and rotate? There we go. Excellent. On my screen, it looks like I'm seeing only part of the slide.
There we go. Yeah. Mhm.
Okay, so couple of images on this first slide that I wanted to point out. On the bottom left is just the section of the trail that where the slide is happening. This is the issue with the utilities has to do with the failing land structure that's threatening those utilities. So things I wanted to talk about, we can go to the next slide, is the reason for doing the utility stabilization. I wanted to touch briefly on previous efforts and kind of show an option for how to stabilize the utilities. We can go to the next slide. Okay, so little background is this is an ongoing problem that's been happening with this section of the trail sliding out, and when it slides, it pulls the utilities with it. So the utilities that are there is a storm drain pipeline, which is a concrete pipeline. It flows via gravity flow, so the angle of the pipe is important. If you have a low spot in the pipe, it won't flow. If the pipe fractures, it will cause a leaking at a spot in the middle of a slide where you don't want it. There is also a water line which is currently isolated due to it being broken from the slide. And there is a phone utility, and in this picture, you can see the green utility box, the kind of over at an angle. It's kind of showing you where the slide's happening. Okay, next slide, please. So in 2010, there was a geotechnical investigation done, and that was in support of a study done by RGH to figure out what to do to mitigate the slide. Efforts were made at that time to keep that section from sliding. Since then, the slide has continued. Since 2011, the water line, which is a 6-inch asbestos concrete pipe, has been isolated, meaning a valve on either end has been added. It's been shut off on either end, and that line is no longer in use. It was recently tested where we opened up one of the valves to see if the line was still intact, and it was found to not be intact. So the findings and where we're at today is that the water line in that section, the drinking water line, is no longer in service and not serviceable. The telephone line is in threat. Any more movement that could break, and the storm drain line is of an unknown quality. We don't know if it's how well it's functioning, if it's functioning, or if it's broken. But it needs to be for the upper system to drain. That is an important piece to the drainage. Okay, so we can go to the next slide. So already hit some of these bullets. All of these utilities right now are buried underground, and burying them underground keeps them at risk. The gravity flow nature of the storm drain line kind of requires that line to maintain that angle. So as ground, like I said previously, if that ground moves, it still is a problem. So we have to address the angle of that. The crossing over the active slide is where we were directed to. We looked at a number of options, and the option that I'm going to present tonight is an aerial support. This had a couple of reasons why this aerial support was chosen. One was its minimal impact on the ground disturbance. So if we could go to the next slide, I kind of have an aerial view to show what we're talking about. Okay, so here is an aerial view of of Van Wyck. Moving from the upper right to the lower left, the water line, that's the 6-inch water line that comes down. There is a water valve that's in right at the top end of this. There is a section called out where the active slide area is. There's a call out there for the green telecom pedestal, which we showed in that previous picture. So I'm getting some pretty strong feedback if people mute their microphones, if they're. So the call out for the telecom kind of gives you a reference in that picture, but there's a section of the trail that is sliding. So at the lower left corner of the water line, it shows where there is another valve. That section in between those two valves is a little over 150 feet, and that is the isolated line. That line is no longer in service for the water line. So what we propose to do is put an anchor on either end of the slide area and use that anchor to suspend an I-beam. The I-beam, we can then attach the water line, the sewer line, and the telecom line to it. So any further movement underneath it, the I-beam would protect yeah, thanks for advancing that. So this image shows the concrete block that would be set into the ground. At the edge of the slide area, the SD is the storm drain line, the W is the water line, and the T is the telecom line, which is right along the top. We would put an angle iron over the top of it to protect that telecom line and also to deter people trying to use this as a walkway. So the advantage is for this this approach is cost, in that the design and installation is relatively straightforward. It allows us to maintain the angle for gravity flow in the storm drain pipeline. If there is further ground movement, it allows us to unbolt and move the anchor to maintain the existing lines. It keeps the lines above ground where they can be inspected and repaired if they are damaged due to movement. It also minimizes the ground disturbance in a sensitive area. So with that, is the end of my presentation, and I'd like to answer any questions.
Patrick, thanks for that, and for that diagram. I just have a quick question, and then I'll open it up. The installation of an I-beam, 150 foot roughly, is there a significant concern or issue with the equipment needed to install such a device? Is that all? Will this area accommodate the equipment needed to install such a device?
So I think I think that is a valid concern. The equipment necessary to move an I-beam of this size, it doesn't necessarily have to be that size. I think the smallest span we could get away with is about a 50-foot span. So let's, if we put a couple of options out there as we go through the design process, I'm thinking it's going to be between 50 and that 150 feet. You could bring that in with a tracked cat, maybe two of them working together to bring it in. It could also be lowered in with a crane. Their access is an issue, and during the design process, we would come up with a strategy for getting that in. There are two buildings on that in that area that have recently had their foundations replaced. The type of beam and equipment used to lift those buildings up while they built the foundations is the same type of equipment that would be used to put this beam in to span this. So I know that the roads and the area there can support that type of equipment.
Okay, thank you very much. Counselors, do we have any questions for Patrick at this point?
I do.
Go ahead.
Yeah, Patrick, is it possible when you put this I-beam in that it also could support some type of footbridge on top of it? That'd be a whole different type of I-beam.
I think the option that I've shown here is just for the utility crossing. This type of approach, if you wanted to expand it for a walking bridge, which is a different part of the project, could accommodate a utility crossing. So we've done that with other bike trail type of work. This area, the geotechnical situation there, it's unstable. So getting a bridge, like people think like, oh, how about a rail bridge or something like that? That's a pretty heavy structure. So not putting weight on an unstable surface is the main concern, which is why we were recommending just the utility crossing and not, but the decision about the bridge would be a different part of the project. And I think Eli, you touched on that. And I think Steve, you touched on that as well. So I'm not, I'm not ready to talk about the bridge piece. I wasn't part of that, part of the design process. Am I answering what you wanted to hear?
Yeah, so if you put the utility bridge in, it would be a whole different engineering project if there was the concept of now wanting to put a footbridge either on top of it or vaulting over it. Am I right?
Correct. The requirements for a footbridge would be considerably different and more complex than it would be for a utility span.
So there's nothing preventing the engineering to do a footbridge or something at a later date?
No.
And Richard, that's what we're going to get to during Trails Committee. And again, if we could really focus on the project at hand, we definitely want to make time for people's ideas and possibilities of spanning that bridge or that gap for pedestrians. But if we could stick with the other elements that are being presented in the connectivity project tonight, and we're trying to get a sense, are we in the right direction for the connectivity project? And use another time to really get into the details of the span, the slumping span. So I really want to ask folks to do their best to separate those two because they really end up being different. And so we want to focus on the rest of the connectivity project.
So just to add to that, Steve, I think to answer Richard's question that I was trying to get at is this does not preclude any further options. By putting in a utility span like we're talking about for like that Steve just mentioned for this section doesn't preclude other efforts at a different time.
And we are facing a major concern with the stormwater aspect of this span. And correct me if I'm wrong, Patrick, but you're right now not able to determine whether or not that stormwater pipe is intact. And if we end up with a heavy rain, is the water going to move where it's supposed to, or is it going to move into the slope?
Yeah, if there's a rupture in that storm drain pipe, it will lubricate that area.
Yeah.
You currently also have an issue with the water line. So yeah. This is a 6-inch water line that feeds that lower section of the city. And right now it's being fed by a 4-inch water line, which has issues with water pressure and meeting your fire demand. So the need to repair or deal with the utilities water as well as stormwater is high.
Thank you for that. Other questions or comments for Patrick?
I'd like to ask one, Steve.
Go ahead.
Just curious how long what is the timeline on this? If we put that in, how long would maybe a 50-foot section last, and how often would there have to be replacements down the line somewhere in the future?
So how long would it last is a function of the stability of the bluff. And how long would it take to install it? It's a pretty fast install. The question would be how long would it take to get our permitting done? And I might ask Trevor to comment on the permitting aspect of it. This above ground with minimal ground disturbance has likely an abbreviated or a shorter permitting process as opposed to other options. Lifespan of this is, on that 20-year span, if there's no more land movement within that spanned area. The larger you make this span, the longer the more outside of the slide area you're going to be. The longer you make the span, the trade-off is it's heavier, which puts more pressure on the slide. And so it's kind of a trade-off. But for the structures themselves, a 20-year lifespan for this is not unexpected.
Thank you.
Other questions for Patrick?
Tom Davies has a question.
Go ahead, Tom.
So Patrick, I'm assuming, and correct me if I'm wrong in my assumption, that when the I-beam gets placed, assuming this is what we move ahead with, it's placed, then also the utility lines are done in conjunction at the same time with the project. So the water line would be put in and
the storm drain, yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
And telecom.
All right.
And just so everybody knows, I can only see 4 or 5 faces and names at a time with the screen share. So feel free to jump in or text me, say you want to speak. I just want to make sure that we're hearing from everybody. And we also have, in the packet, we also have an image of the entire connectivity project with the crosswalk up at Edwards, with the observation areas, the overlooks, the vistas. And so please consider that as well.
I have a comment.
Go ahead.
This is Gail Kenny. It seems to me that it's premature to be deciding on this solution for the utilities before anything's been really decided on whether there's going to be a trail to continue through that area. That's my comment.
Okay, thank you. And as I understand it, just to respond, and Patrick, please let me know if this is an untrue statement, but the stormwater and drinking water and utility is not meant to replace or in any way preclude any other work being done on that particular section. And so the work that we're doing is time sensitive because we have to have these things in place. But again, it does not prevent us from doing something in the future. So Patrick, is that a fair statement?
That is exactly the way I see it. Is you have an immediate need to address the storm drain and water utilities. I think losing telecom would not be good either, but the immediate need is the water and storm drain. And installing this is an alternative. We need to start a design to get it permitted so that we can take action. The decision to take action can happen. This is one of the alternatives, and through the permitting process. And I would invite Trevor to comment on that too. These other options could come up in that permitting process. So this is the least cost and least intrusive option for keeping your utilities intact.
And Trevor, do you have anything you'd like to weigh in right now?
Sure, I think so. I think there does seem to be some confusion about where we are in this process, and I think I see that there's really three different issues, three different things going on right now. This item is related to this Caltrans grant. The city, there's a timeline and a deadline for using this Caltrans money. And I think it became clear to staff that we were not going to be able to work out a trail repair solution within the timeline of this grant. And so what staff has decided to do is we still want to be able to use this money. And so, we're going to be talking to Caltrans about this project that's in front of you that includes improvements on Edward Street. It includes Vista Points, and it includes the utility span, none of which precludes a future trail repair. And then another issue that we have going on is the temporary closure of the Van Wyck Trail for safety purposes, which has been the city has been asked to do that by its insurance agency. And so when we're talking about the Trails Committee meeting next week and the Planning Commission meeting next week, the item on those agendas is just the temporary closure. So it's basically just approving what's already been done with the temporary closure of the Van Wyck Trail. So there's those two things. And then there's this larger issue of the trail itself. And we're not ready to, we don't have a proposal at this point, and the city is going to continue to be reaching out to stakeholders and working with the engineers and trying to find solutions to that, but no decision has been made, and that's not what we're going to be discussing tonight or next week. That's a little bit larger issue that's going to take a little bit more time, if that helps to clarify things.
Thank you for that clarification, Trevor. David, I saw your hand up.
Yeah, I'd just like to comment too and say that this presentation, believe it or not, aligns with the design I have for the future, just so to set everybody at ease that this makes total sense with the two-tiered system that I have that I'm going to talk to the engineers about when I get the chance. So just to appease everybody's mind at ease a little bit.
All right. Other comments about the current connectivity project that we're talking about?
Steve, this is Dick Bruce again.
Go ahead, Dick.
I have a question for Mr. Sullivan. On the I-beam, what size would the footings be on that I-beam construction, and how deep would they have to be set?
Those are great questions. I think that there's, like I was alluding to before, that the short answer is we don't know yet because the design isn't done yet. We're still in the conceptual phase. So there's factors to trade off, i.e. access. How far are we going to span? The minimum would be that 50 foot. Maximum could be up to that 150 foot. So the farther out you get, the more of the unstable area that you're going to be able to span, but the bigger your input is. So we also need to look at our cultural resources and how we impact cultural resources and how we do our permitting. So there'll be a trade-off on those factors, and that comes out in the more detailed design when we work out some of these other alternatives.
In kind of round figures, say it was 100 feet. Could you give me any kind of an estimate in round figures at a length of 100 feet?
A 3 foot by 4 foot box that could go down as deep as six feet, depending on what the subsurface conditions are. Okay,
thank you very much.
Mm-hmm. And keep in mind too, that's an estimate. I didn't have that on. I didn't pull up my charts and check that. So.
No, that's fine. I was just asking for round numbers. Thank you.
Don't worry, Patrick. We're not going to hold you to those numbers. Other questions or comments?
I have a question and a comment. So I I'm a bit confused as to the direction of this conversation. And I think Trevor tried to allude to that earlier. We're talking right now about setting the utilities on something to fix them. That seems like a different agenda item than the Van Wyck connectivity project, since none of them, I'm under the understanding that the money for the Van Wyck connectivity project would not pay for this utility thing. Am I correct in that, or am I incorrect in that assumption? From anyone who might know.
This is Becky, and I could attempt to address that. The project that originally included repairing the trail included addressing the utilities within that solution, which was potentially a retaining wall. And so the thinking of staff right now is that we will still be requesting that the Caltrans grant help us address those utilities by helping to construct this bridge or whatever design is agreed upon. And the option to rebuild the trail in that location, as Trevor said, it's a bigger issue, and we no longer can include that piece in this grant project because of the constraints of time, and just it's been very difficult to get a way forward to juggle all these pieces. So the trail continuing through that area is not part of this project at this time. We're trying to come up with a proposed scope that the community could support, and request a scope change through Caltrans to fund as much as we could of the original project. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, it sort of does. And also, so the next part thank you, Becky. And the next part would be, so are we going to ask questions of staff regarding the staff report, council comments on the connectivity project? It seems like we're off in the woods here, not directly with the connectivity project comments.
Okay, this is Eli, and I can weigh in here. We have working on this project from GHD, both Steve Allen and Josh Wolf, and they're working on the connectivity portion. Unfortunately, they're both on vacation this week. So Patrick Sullivan is from the same firm and has some familiarity with the connectivity portion, and plus Trevor and Becky can also weigh in. But generally speaking, matter of fact, if we do have a picture of the map, that would be very helpful. It's that concept map that we presented when we talked to the stakeholders. And that basically shows the fact that the bike lane and the sidewalk would be on the south side of Edwards between Van Wyck and Galindo, and also a new crosswalk on Edwards below Hector Street. And then 3 vista points that are on Van Wyck, 2 of them at either end of the slumped trail, and then one on where Edwards meets Van Wyck, near the crosswalk. So this is the concept map, and it does show the improvements that will be part of this Caltrans project. So yes, rerouting the utilities is a part of it, but the bulk of it is actually the connectivity portion for pedestrians and bicyclists. And that's the main reason why we had invited the property owners along Edwards. So at the stakeholder meeting, we had the property owners on the south side of Edwards because they're directly impacted. The sidewalk and the bike lane will go on the south end of Edwards. For this meeting, we also have specifically invited the Edwards, North Edwards. residents because they're on the other side of the street and also are impacted. And of course, invited the whole overall community. And we wanted to have, both the Churai and the Rancheria and the Yurok all be able to weigh in on this concept. So between Patrick and Trevor and Becky and possibly myself, we can help answer any questions you might have regarding this map.
Okay.
And also right below on the lower right-hand side, it shows the cross-section of the street where there will be the sidewalk and where the bike lane is, and then also where the street is. Okay, so I'll turn it over to whomever.
Okay, so I guess maybe I'll just ask a question right now. So it's referred to a couple times in here, stakeholder comments, review comments, and I did catch some of public comment. And I would like to know what the stakeholder comments were. You just mentioned that the overall community was invited. I thought I heard you say, but I have also heard that that is not exactly the case. So I think
the overall community is invited to this meeting, and we specifically sent letters to the North Edwards property owners about this meeting. But the other meetings that were held regarding the stakeholders, they were the stakeholders on the south end of the Edwards and also the Churai, because that is the area that the south end of Edwards and the Churai were the directly impacted stakeholders.
Okay.
And then in this meeting, we have all the others invited to weigh in and be aware and ask questions.
Okay, thanks for clarifying. The way I heard you mention it earlier, it sounded like other people were invited that weren't the property stakeholders. So I think everybody in this town is a stakeholder for this project, and I think it would be beneficial for everyone to see what the comments were made at the stakeholder meeting. I think it would be maybe alleviate people's concerns or heighten their concerns that this project is being designed around private property holders' interests that are next to the trail. So if we could be fully transparent and put out the notes for everyone to see of what has occurred at these meetings, I think that would be going in the right direction. My second question is at the bottom of the staff report. It says, based on the feedback, the revised concept addressed many major concerns. And I'm assuming those are major concerns of the stakeholders. I'm not sure. And what are those major concerns? There's nothing that says what major concerns may have been. Like, are major concerns that property owners do not want to see someone walking down the trail at the base of their property? Is that a major concern? Is a major concern that they do not want construction happening on the street side in front of their house? There's a lot of different things that could be major concerns that I think the general public might be interested in as well, besides myself.
Well, let me weigh in and then we can have the others weigh in. But specifically, as was mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, the continuation of the existing Van Wyck Trail was not addressed because part of this project, or really the bulk of this project, is the connectivity rerouting along Edwards of both the bicycle and pedestrian. So we were addressing that portion of it and also addressing the vista points, which take people to about the same way where the trail would have before, and we wanted to get buy-in on that. Fortunately, at the meetings that we did have, the input obtained from the various stakeholders that were present at the meetings were very favorable about this whole concept, about the routing of the bike lane and the sidewalk on the south side of Edwards, and also about the 3 vista points that were proposed. So that's the general of it. And then Becky is preparing the notes from that meeting, which will be made public also.
Okay.
So I'll turn it over to whomever else may want to weigh in a little further.
This is Becky, and I just wanted to address a couple points that have come up. I am sorry that I used the word stakeholder meeting, if that's using too broad of a term. We knew we were having a hearing at this council meeting, but we wanted to give the landowners that would be impacted and the a chance to say, to express their questions and concerns when they looked at this map ahead of this meeting. It is not meant to be making any kind of a deal or agreement in that meeting. We were simply giving them the courtesy, since they would be their property, a chance to have something to say ahead of time. And I'm just going to give one example of a major concern. The right-of-way is, as people know, there's a landslide there, and it wasn't, if a trail was going to be rebuilt, one question was, could we go uphill on, get property from the adjacent landowners? So that was something that we wanted to ask about, and some of them indicated no. So it sort of made sense to look at what our options were by finding out what some of the neighboring people thought. I will get the meeting notes summarized and provide the summary of the input as soon as I can. Last week was very busy, and I just haven't been able to finish everything. So I will do that as quickly as possible. And so again, I want to apologize for using the term stakeholder. I recognize there's a lot of different types of stakeholders, and it was just, as I quickly put this agenda item together, I didn't specify that, so.
Thank you.
Thank you, Becky. Bryce, it looks like your hand is up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members. I sent you an email about this topic. I hope you had a chance to read it. The problem I see with the way it's presented is it really seems to assume that there is going to be no trail on the Van Wyck where it traditionally has been. You're talking about routing all the foot traffic onto Edward Street. So it really sounds to me like, you've already decided to close the trail, and it's not really a lot of comfort to hear that, well, we're going to talk in the future about possibly some other alternatives down there for a footbridge or something. If there's a time constraint for the grant funding, has anyone formally asked for an extension of time so that the trail part of this can be incorporated in? I can't believe that a simple wooden footbridge, the kind you see in the national parks, for example, or the state parks, if you've got it looks like it's going to be at least a foot, 16-inch wide steel I-beam running along there. The addition of some redwood so people have a place to walk just can't be that complicated. I mean, I'm no engineer, but I've got a sense of common sense of how, things are constructed and so forth. So I think you'd be better off. The idea of the bicycle part of this, I don't see a big pressing need for that. That's a really steep hill. I don't see a lot of people riding up and down that on bicycles, and I don't think the addition of a bike lane would change that. And a sidewalk, here again, if we have the old trail back, I think most people would prefer to walk on the trail than a sidewalk. And the question is, whose property would the sidewalk be on? Would that be on the property owner's land? Is the street going to be wider? Anybody have the answer for that question?
Okay, let me weigh in. It's within existing right-of-way along Edwards where the sidewalk and also the bicycle path will be. And then in addition to that, the Caltrans project has already gotten one extension previously, and we were asking for this extension, and they actually want us to give them everything we can by November, or else the project is dead, which means that the city would lose the over $700,000 of the grant. So therefore, with the concept plan that was shown a little bit ago, the idea is to move forward with the project and then address the existing trail at a later time using other funds, so we don't lose that 700-some thousand, because we need to get buy-in from them by November.
Well,
And I'm gonna jump back in here and Eli, can you? Yeah, thank you. I'm just gonna jump back in here and hopefully, I really want to put an end to this assumption that the city is trying to do anything to permanently abandon this trail. We hear from everyone the importance of this trail. We also have to act on the utilities and the stuff that Patrick started with. So please dissociate this notion that because we're trying to solve a problem, that we're trying to get away with something else, which is to abandon this trail. We hear the community. There is no doubt in anyone's mind the importance of this trail to the community, and the long term that we've had this access to this beautiful slope. That does not change the fact that we have an emergency that is pending, and we are not in a position to do anything other than address that emergency. So please attend these meetings in the future, and let's use the brain power of the folks in the city to find a way to restore some semblance of a trail on that slope. But now is not the time. Now is not the time to spend on a 50 to 100 foot section when all of these other issues are time sensitive and important.
Can I respond briefly, Mr. Mayor? Well, I appreciate those sentiments, but as this current project is worded, it talks about eliminating the foot traffic on the existing trail and rerouting it down Edward Street. That's not an emergency. I understand that the pipes are an emergency. I'm completely in favor of the plan in that regard. But a bike lane and a sidewalk, if you're not making the street any wider, it's not going to make the situation any better than it is. So I would take that part out completely. And if you want to go ahead and do the utilities part, that's fine. But I just cannot believe that for $700,000, you can't have an I-beam pipe holder and a wooden footbridge also.
And again, we are going to address this, and we are not going to keep talking about this span of 50 to 100 feet. And because we're taking steps to assure safe pedestrian traffic on Edwards does not mean that we are abandoning this trail. So I'm going to ask everyone to please stop trying to find solutions tonight for this 50 to 100 foot section. We have to solve this emergency. We have to do it, and we have the money to do so. And we are trying to make sure that the way we are spending that money is acceptable and not as a replacement. I see Mr. Madrone's hand up.
And I need him.
I'd like to be invited to the next
Steve.
meeting.
Steve, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good evening, council members and community. Lively discussion. I do appreciate the council's efforts in trying to figure out how to utilize available funding in a productive and supported way in the community. I did take a walk with some of the council members, the engineers and others a couple of months ago to look at the improvements on Edwards, including the sidewalks, curbs, gutters, et cetera. And as it was shown to be within the right of way, and actually does, in a sense, Bryce, widen the road in effect, that right now a significant portion of right-of-way is not actually included in the road area. And that's where the sidewalk would go. So that looks really good to me in general, personally. But, you know, in regards to this primary item on your agenda, the I-beam approach to suspending the utilities across the slide, I do think there was a comment earlier by Gail about this being a bit premature. And I also think it's a bit piecemeal. And again, I do appreciate, you know, you're up against a timeline. You're trying your best to figure out how to utilize these funds to get some good things done. You're absolutely right that that storm drain is a threat. I was the last one to inspect that storm drain under contract with the city in 2008, I believe it was. The city hired my company, Madrone Enterprises, to work with Public Works and dig out that culvert or storm drain that goes across the slide. So we inspected it at that time. That was about 12 years ago. At that time, everything was holding strong. It's a bituminous pipe, which has a kind of a oily, or not oily, but it has it's not just metal, it's cased in bituminous material that allows it to prevent rust in that coastal environment. At any rate, it was intact. And right below the garden at the area where the driveway is to the house right there, between the house and the driveway, that piece of pipe that goes underneath what would be a driveway entrance to the garden parcel, that piece of pipe was replaced at that same time. It had been a 9-inch diameter pipe, and it was replaced with a 12-inch diameter pipe. So I am the person in the community that has direct knowledge of that storm drain and looked at it most recently. Now, 12 years is a lot of time. And I agree, you can't just do nothing about that. I frankly think there is a much cheaper alternative that I'm going to explain to you for dealing with all three of these utilities, and also not putting anything in the way of whatever possible trail options you might consider in the future, because this I-beam will be in the way. It is in the right-of-way, and you don't have hardly any right-of-way above that I-beam location to put any kind of a trail. So don't kid yourself in thinking that this I-beam would not be directly in the middle of whatever options you might be looking at, unless you are able to acquire land upslope from willing landowners. That's a different matter. But where the I-beam would go would be directly in the area that a trail would go within the easement. So what you could do is take the storm drain, and rather than have it run directly across the slide, at the garden, you can make a 90-degree turn and run that pipe with secure anchoring down to the toe of the slope and come in along the beach and develop a dry well, rock-armored infiltration basin for that water to infiltrate in before it goes into the ocean, which is exactly what you're going to be doing down at the bay, at the harbor, with a lot of the stormwater projects in town. You're going to be injecting them into these infiltration basins, basically, to filter before going into the bay. So you could do that with that storm drain right there. Boom, done. Cheap, not that expensive, no big I-beam, no big heavy equipment, etc. Now, the 6-inch line, you're going to be tearing up Edwards probably for these sidewalks, curbs, gutters, and everything, exactly where the water line runs. And it'd be a lot cheaper and more longevity to the effort to just simply replace the water line, the 4-inch line, at the intersection of Van Wyck and Edwards up at the top. And from that point where the 6-inch goes down Van Wyck, put in a new 6-inch line on Edwards before you do the sidewalks, curbs, and gutters. I know that's unusual for Public Works to do it that way. Usually we pave first and then we tear things up. But, so you go ahead and you upgrade that 6-inch line all the way down Edwards and Galindo, making a permanent improvement to your system that has no longevity issues with the slide or anything else down there. So, and as far as the cable, that's not a big deal. You can run the cable across in the surface of the soils there, and it's not all of a sudden going to evacuate and tear up the hillside, et cetera. So I think you have a much cheaper option to take care of all three of your utilities. It puts nothing in the way of potential trail opportunities to be worked out down the road, and it uses the monies in the grant in a timely fashion. And the other thing about this proposal for the I-beam and the utility crossing is it's also recommended to remove the existing retaining wall, and it calls it a failed structure. And I just want to be really clear, that retaining wall has not failed. It did everything it was supposed to do. It is still vertical. It is held back vertical by dead men that were anchored into the slope. And what has happened is as the slope has slid into the ocean from the waves cutting at the toe of the slide, the structure has stayed vertical and dropped down slope as that slide has moved, but it has stayed structurally sound. And if you remove that, you will start seeing some slope movement in that area. And so I recommend that you don't remove that wall until you get a larger project to do the toe armoring with willow, log revetments at the slope at the toe, if that can be approved. I've worked with the city council talking about that for 20 years. That's your long-term fix. So I'm just wanted to offer you some suggestions for solutions for your emergency need for the utilities to be done in a way that doesn't hamper anything else. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Madrone. I do want to hear from Patrick as he applies his engineering brain to some of these comments over the last several minutes. Patrick, are you able to weigh in?
Thanks, Steve. I appreciate, Steve, your comments, and Mr. Madrone, I appreciate them. I think that the idea of taking this water and bringing it to the toe of the slope from a hydrogeologic perspective is a great idea. We have been working with our regulators since 2006 to deal with the discharge to the bay. And we have put in considerable effort in computer modeling, in water quality sampling. I know that the idea of putting an infiltration basin on the beach is a non-starter with our regulators. It was a very hard uphill battle, and I think many people here who have been part of that process understand that, and I think we need to be really clear that it is not a trivial process to make a new discharge into an ASBS, and they will consider a new infiltration basin on the beach at the foot of that toe of that slope. They will consider that a discharge to the bay. That was my main comment.
Thank you, Patrick. David, looks like you have. I'm going to move back to the council here for just a minute to try to consolidate some of our comments. So at this point, go ahead, David.
I appreciate the dialogue. Yeah, I definitely appreciate the dialogue going on here. I'm not sure what the transit how it's going to work out. I'm sure what the transit how it's going to work out height wise, but the design I was thinking of is a two-tiered system, and it will actually integrate that I-beam into half the walkway because I'm going to be building up from down below and adding two rather than taking out. But that's a different conversation with somebody like Patrick or somebody when we're out here and can actually look at stuff. So I like the exchange of ideas going on here though, because a couple of things I've thought of have been confirmed and a couple have kind of not worked out. So it's I feel like we're progressing for that. But like I say, everybody's welcome. I'm here almost every day to talk about this because it's one of the reasons I got on the council actually when I moved here. So thanks.
At this point, do we have any other councilor comments regarding the connectivity project that is in the agenda?
I have one more comment. It just kind of piggybacks on Steve said it, and I wanted to say it as well. That I know that this isn't it is indirectly about the trail, and I feel like removing a retaining wall that's still holding soil up right there would create tons of problems down the road if we're going to put in steps or anything else that would help alleviate the trail issue. So if we're commenting on this project as I see it on the map, I think that I don't know why that's on there. I would hope we could remove failed retaining wall from a potential part of the project. I think that needs to stay there. I mean, in order to protect what we have of being able to put a trail in, that I believe that should, and that needs to stay. That needs the retaining wall, excuse me, needs to stay. So
I agree. Patrick, can you, I don't know if that's an older plan that was left in there from an older version of this plan, rather?
I don't think I'm prepared to comment on the geotech analysis. I think that's a Josh or Steve question. I think whether or not the wall has failed would be answered. And I think it has been answered, but I would defer to them.
Fair enough. Any other counselors? I see your hand up, Jim. I'll get to you in a minute here. Any other counselors have questions regarding the agenda item here? Okay, let's move it back to public comment. Mr. Baker?
Yeah, Jim Baker, former council member and interested observer. This is a minor thing, but it's my recollection that the downhill below the Van Wyck Trail, but between that and the beach is also private property. So I'm wondering if Supervisor Madrone or Patrick has approached that landowner in the event of that particular option.
I have not. I don't know the status of the property ownership. I know about permitting our infiltration galleries throughout the city and in the parking lot down at the bottom of the hill. And I know the efforts that we went through to that. And because of those efforts and the feedback we got from the Coastal Commission, from the State Water Board and the Water Quality Control Board, that I didn't consider any infiltration on the beach as an option.
Okay, I just one additional remark. The only reason that comes to mind is that there was a tree trimming issue in that area. The property owners above the slide wanted to have some trees trimmed, and the city had to have a survey done in order to determine where that property line was between the downhill side of Van Wyck and the private property owners in order to get permission. The trees had to be cut within the right of way. That's the only reason I brought it up. It's not a structural issue or anything else. You had mentioned acquiring private property before, and that's the only reason I brought it up.
Other comments or questions for folks from the community?
Hi.
Anita Thompson again.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Sarah. I'm sorry.
Sarah, I think you got the cue here.
So I would just say that we would like a copy of the I-beam option. I know that that's one that hasn't been presented to us before. I'd also like to request when that option was developed, like a date on that. And then again, I would request that we get all the information about the possible options and ideas that are being presented to engineers and staff that the city is considering, because I think that, we've gotten some information, but this project just on a whole over the past, 5 years or so, it's been really difficult to try to suss out what the council is actually considering, what engineers are considering, and then stay consistent with that. I know that, projects evolve, but it seems like, when we have a meeting, we're presented specific information, and then when it goes to council like this week, there's a whole other presentation being presented that we didn't know anything about. And it's really difficult to be able to give a thoughtful comment or to be able to support a project when we don't really know what the project is. And I understand that holistically this project has a lot of problems, but I would also just like to bring up that since the beginning of this project, that, the Cherry Ancestral Society has been participating and has weighed in with a lot of comments and recommendations. And that we are not just affected by the southern portion of this, that the project affects pretty like a lot of the study area along Edward Street all the way up. So, we are happy to try to work with the city, but we need to be able to consider everything. And so we want to make sure that we're getting all of the information. And so that's going to make things easier on us in the long run, because we have had a lot of problems with this project over the last few years.
Thank you for your.
I wanted to weigh in for 1 minute, Steve, if it's possible.
Yes, go ahead.
I just wanted Sarah to know that last week when we had our meeting, Steve Allen from GHD said he wanted to go and take a look at that area where the pipe would be, where this I-bridge would be. And I told him, I says, I'll join him. And then I actually last week held the measure on one side, and then he went in one direction, and then I kept holding, and then he went in the opposite direction. And today, the picture, the image that's being shown by Patrick, today, this is the first time I've seen that image. So it just evolved between last week and today. So I just want you to know, because otherwise we would have showed it to you last week.
Well, there was no mention of an I-bridge. A bigger concern.
Okay.
Ms. Provost.
Thank you. Thank you, City Council, for having an open discussion around this. First of all, I just wanted to applaud the council in their January 14th meeting to pass a motion, which was to abandon the Van Wyck Trail, direct staff to explore options to protect the stormwater infrastructure and adjacent utilities, and engage in stakeholder meetings to discuss connectivity as it relates to moving people through town and exploring options that the grant will support. So, I know we haven't talked about the trail, but I hear concerns tonight that around the trail, and I think that's another issue that has to be addressed with, because I'm hearing the science and land is moving all the time, and I'd be very concerned if the council is still considering any kind of trail. But being the connectivity of what we're supposed to be working on and focusing on tonight, I do think looking at all the feasible options, and I appreciate Steve Madrone's suggestions, but I'm sure the engineers have thought of all the different options given this very sensitive area that we're addressing. And so, it's something that's going to take a lot of thought. We're all probably not going to agree with the decision that the city has to make. But I do appreciate the staff reports on this and what might be a workable situation. So thank you.
Thank you, Sherry. And really I really appreciate your summary of all the different things. And really, just to remind folks, we're on phase 1 here, which is to deal with the immediate concern, and phase 2 is not going away. So we are absolutely able to look at all the recommendations for the connectivity project tonight, but no decisions. Remember, in the agenda is a recommendation to direct staff to continue this process. So thank you for your comments. Other comments from folks in the community?
Anita Thompson.
Go ahead, Anita.
Yeah, at the July 14th City Council meeting, item water main replacement on Van Wyck, City Council authorized an emergency temporary bypass repair for the water main. Would it be possible, instead of making it temporary, we make it permanent? So that way we wouldn't have to use the Van Wyck area and just make it a permanent fix for the water main. And as you stated, it is an emergency. My concern, as you know, is a fire safety issue. And I'd like to also know the possibility of making it permanent and not using the Van Wyck. And also, have we started working on that project yet? Because there was some talk about trying to get that done within a calendar year. There's definitely an urgency of getting it done, bypassed. We have correct water flow.
Yeah, first of all, regarding the temporary water main fix, that has not commenced yet. And as far as making it more permanent, I mean, that was one option, was talking about having the water actually go down, the second pipe go down on Edwards instead of having it go where the stormwater is currently planned. So that was one option that was discussed, just having the stormwater go along the bluff and then have the two water lines both go along Edwards. Patrick Sullivan actually is more of a water expert than I think anyone at GHD. So maybe Patrick can weigh in as to what may be feasible.
Well, I think you brought up two good points. One was the emergency issue, which it pertains to a 4-inch water line meeting the water supply and fire demand. So the emergency portion that was approved was to approve the design, and the contracting and efforts on that have started. The idea would be that we would get that emergency need met as soon as possible, which is within the year. The long-term design, the long-term fix that you referred to would be in conjunction with other projects ongoing. So you minimize your disturbance to the road. Gives us a chance to evaluate all the alternatives for meeting the water supply demand. So the emergency portion of that is, as far as what I understand, and has been started, at least in the contracting and preliminary design portions. I think, I mean, as far as the feasibility of the different options, I think that the feasibility discussions would come out during that design process.
Thank you.
And I just want to be mindful of time. So we do have other agenda items tonight. So I just want to keep people in mind, aware of that. Do we have any closing comments for, again, our recommendation is to direct staff, engineers, planners, et cetera. Do we have other comments that are relevant to the direction to move with the continued investigation of options? Really is what we're looking at. Mr. Madrone.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a quick question for Patrick that might help with this. Patrick, the storm drain runoff that goes through that culvert across the slide, that does not include Edwards Street. Is that correct? I think it only picks up that upper driveway of Van Wyck that comes down to Julie Fulkerson's old house, basically, and the slope of the house right above it, which is heavily vegetated. But can you clarify that for me, Patrick?
So there is a curb on the south side of Edwards as it comes down. So I don't know that I could say that it doesn't pull that water in. The entirety of the flow coming into that pipe comes up from an upper system, and it's not just that south side. Is that answering the question?
Yeah, I'd like to see the drawings at some point, because it's my understanding that they're not interconnected, that the main line goes down Edwards.
I'm not looking at the drawings right now either, so.
Okay, no problem.
But,
yeah, sorry to put you on the spot there.
My question, my concern was when, I did all the hydrology and hydraulics for that area, and I remember delineating watersheds in that regions and where they drain to. And so I know that there is water picked up from and brought down that might not be in the pipe, but it might be on in that curb in the parking area by the lighthouse that comes down the hill there. So I'd be happy to go through that with, we could pull up the plans that we have and go through that. I'd be happy to go through them with you.
That'd be great. Yeah, I just suggest that we look carefully at that, because if my on-the-ground truthing of this over the years is correct, it's really just the surface runoff from Van Wyck Street or driveway down to Julie's and the slope above it that was Katie Boyle's old house there. And if in fact that's true, what we're talking about is a very small stormwater runoff catchment. And I certainly understand the comment that you made earlier, and I am not suggesting that we take any stormwater runoff down and inject it directly into the beach. That was not what my suggestion was. So I just wanted to clarify that, because clearly nobody's going to approve that. That was the way the old system worked. They picked up everything going down Edwards all the way down to the parking lot and then dumped it at Boat Launch Beach there in that open culvert right at the beach, basically. So that is not what I'm suggesting. I'm saying that I think this is a very small catchment and that one could build a dry well injection off the beach, above the beach, 10, 15, 20 feet above the beach in the toe of the slope with armored riprap and other things, so that it wouldn't be delivered directly to the beach. It would be injected down below. And so I'm just thinking that if it is a small catchment, that might be a possibility. And if the 6-inch line can be replaced or just added to the 4-inch line up along Edwards, you're really getting more bang for your buck. So I appreciate the work you have to do to look at all these alternatives and determine their feasibility. Thank you for the chance to clarify, Mr. Mayor.
You bet, Steve. Other closing comments for directing staff on how to proceed with this connectivity project? I don't see any. All right, thank you very much for the discussion this evening. And again, I did not mean to thwart any discussion, but we do have a full agenda, and we will be coming back to this in more detail in the future. So moving on to number 2, the decision regarding closure of the Galindo Trail. And I know that Trevor has investigated quite a bit some of the permitting process and whatnot in the agenda. So we're moving on to, if you're able to follow in the agenda, not sure what page it is, but Trevor, can you please give us an introduction from a permitting perspective?
Sure. So this is something that the TRI have requested a number of times because the trail is impacting cultural resources. And so this item is for consideration. It's not taking action to close the trail, but it would be directing staff to pursue that. It's not going to be a simple procedure, and it's not going to be anything that we're going to have a hearing on right away. So I have talked briefly with Coastal Commission staff about the process for closing a trail. And we're gonna need to address some things. For example, they want some information showing that the trail is having negative impacts, and I don't know exactly what that means. They want the city to address the possibility of prescriptive rights. Again, I don't know exactly what that's going to entail. Their other comment was that when you close a trail under the Coastal Act, you do have to look at alternatives and provide sort of a equivalent access in time, place, and manner. So, for example, I asked whether the boardwalk that goes from Lower Van Wyck down to the harbor area would provide that alternative access, and their initial comment was no, because it doesn't get pedestrians to the same place, which is Launcher Beach. And to get to Launcher Beach after exiting that boardwalk, you sort of have to cross an area that has pretty heavy traffic at times. So anyway, it's the Galindo Trail is identified in the city's LCP, and trail closure does require a coastal development permit. So the first step in the process would be to actually amend the city's LCP to remove that trail from the description and the maps. That LCP amendment is going to have to go through the Coastal Commission. So, staff's going to have to work pretty closely with them on moving forward with this process. And again, it's going to be something that we're going to also have additional public discussions and hearings about, but staff does have some legwork to do in order to present the public with good information in order to make an informed decision. So the action tonight is simply directing staff to pursue the idea of Galindo Street closure, work with stakeholders, Coastal Commission, others to move that process forward.
Thank you very much, Trevor. And I also want to reiterate that this is an agenda item that was moving forward, and then about a year and a half ago was sort of put back on the back burner. And so we are returning to this, where the agreement was made to pursue this. But like I said, other issues came up with the city. And we want to, plus this has actually been going on for longer than that. 2017, I believe, was the last time the city the first time the city made a decision in this direction. So we are returning to this topic and really trying to find folks' ideas and comments and input on this trail and the sacred ground that it covers, or crosses rather, and moving forward with the extensive permitting process. So at this point, I would like to see if any members of the council have questions for Trevor on her prepared remarks. Then at that point, we'll open it up to the residents. So anyone from the council?
I do.
Mr. Klompus.
Yes. Can you hear me? All right.
Yes.
Okay. So I understand that the trail was put in 1990. And it was put over an area of archaeological significance. The one article I read indicated that Axel Lindgren II was really unable to help direct where the trail would be, so it would not impact areas of archaeological significance. So the one question I have is, I don't want to walk on the trail if it goes through somebody else's area that we should not be disturbing. But the question really for perhaps Sarah Lindgren or the Churai Ancestral Society, is there a way to reroute the trail that would not impact areas that are of significant importance, or is that no longer possible at this particular stage? That's my question. Thank you.
Hi, this is Sarah from the Churai Ancestral Society. That's a question that the board would have to answer as far as like rerouting the trail. But I think that I want to clarify that Axel Lindgren was not, he was not confused, and he absolutely did advise how to install the trail. So I'm not sure where that article was written, but that's incorrect. He did tell people how to install the trail, chose not to follow his direction. But I think at this time, City Council has already voted to close the trail. I understand that it's a lot of legwork, but please understand that it's been a lot of legwork for us because we've been working on this since 1990. So while it might be a year and a half for City Council, and while it might be, paperwork for staff, we're more than happy to help in any way that we can. And we've already offered that to Trevor. We'll give our assistance, but we've been working on this since 1990, so we're definitely we understand what happens when a project takes a lot of legwork, and I just would hope that City Council would uphold the vote that they did in trying to make efforts to close the trail.
Did that answer your question, Richard?
Yes, yes, I think so.
Okay. Other comments, questions from the city council at this point?
I have one or two. Tom.
Go ahead, Tom.
So I've heard reference to that the city has voted already before to close this trail, and other comments. I think it would be helpful to have all of that information to review rather than people's recollection, have it in black and white. You mentioned something about 2017. I've heard something mentioned 2003. I think it would be very helpful to have all this information compiled so that we can review that information as well. So that's something I think staff could come up with. I'm also concerned that a lot of language here about the California Coastal Commission has come up about how to close this trail or what would need to be the process. And this is also very related to the Van Wyck Trail. I've brought this up for the last year and a half. This is the same process that the Van Wyck Trail has to go through, and we're finally starting to address some of these things as well. So this will also be a discussion item on the next Trails Committee just to talk about what would require reasons, etc., to have another way for the public to weigh in on this topic. So any information that we could get would be fantastic to guide discussion. That's all I have right now. Thanks.
All right. Other questions or comments from the council? Hearing none, opening it up to the public. Questions or comments regarding this agenda item from the general public? Mr. Kenny.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I have to tell you, I'm very much against the idea of closing this trail. My family and I have been enjoying that trail since it was put in 1990. And in fact, I was just walking on it today, and there probably is a grave there somewhere. In fact, the Museum Society has a picture of it that I've seen. Has a white picket fence around it. But today, you cannot tell where there might be a grave. It's all grown over, and whoever is buried there has been resting in peace, and it is not being disturbed by people walking by. We have a cemetery up on the hill here in Trinidad with people walk through it all the time. That's one idea of a cemetery, is you go and visit the person who's buried there and you commune with them. So the idea that there's some inconsistency between a grave and people walking in that area just doesn't make any sense to me. And you know, that is a city right of way. It's Galindo Street. It goes all the way down to the bottom of the hill and makes a left-hand turn onto the Launcher Beach. That, you know, it's a really bad idea, and I hope the city gets away from the idea of closing that trail. It's a really important resource for those of us who live here in Trinidad and enjoy it, and it should be enjoyed on into the future.
Thank you, Mr. Kenny. Other comments, questions? Yes, Ms. Provost. I believe you're on mute, Sherry.
Thank
There
you.
we go.
Thank you very much. The Yurok tribe has been asked, you know, and stepped up to this too, as far as the concern of having this trail open. And when you go back and you look at your notes and, you know, the agreements made, you're going to see letters from the Yurok tribe too, that, you know, support that this trail be closed. You know, and I'm sorry, Mr. Kenny feels the way he does about the cemetery place, and to treat it in a way that's, you know, that's able to have people walk through it. You know, the difference between the cemetery and Trinidad is people know it's the cemetery. people go in there with respect in it when they go and visit their loved ones. And majority of people who use this trail are probably tourists or locals who don't even know about these ancestral lands. And I just find the comments discouraging to recognize, the ancestors from our area here. And so there were two comments in that, is that if you could find the letters from the York tribe that go back and also encourage the closure of this because of the cultural sensitivity. I'd include that with all your notes and your agreements that you've made previously. Thank you.
Thank you, Sherry. Other comments from the community? Mr. Baker.
Well, I'm going to try to keep this short, but I was one of the people who voted to close the trail, not abandon the right-of-way, which is a different issue. But both Jack West and I were on, we represented the city council with the original Shore management team meetings. And I still remember the first meeting that we had. That was the first thing that came up in the meeting with the Shore Ancestral Society and their representatives, was that there was a burial in that area. I hate to disagree with Bryce because I have a great deal of respect for him, but I might say that in the cemetery, in the Trinidad cemetery, I don't walk on graves there either. And it's simply a matter of respect, I think. In this particular situation, as Bryce mentioned, there is evidence of at least one grave, the white picket fence, and also the story that Axel Lindgren II wrote in the Trinidad Museum newsletter regarding what took place around that grave and some of the personal issues, which are very complicated issues. I voted to close the trail because I don't think we know where that burial is exactly enough to say that that trail does not pass over that grave or other graves in the area. And that's why I voted for it. That's why I voted to close the trail, simply out of respect for the Chura Ancestral Societies telling us that the trail passed over graves. That's a different issue than simply, I mean, that raises it in my mind to a separate level. And I understand the importance of the trail since 1990. I grew up here. I'm 77 years old. The trail wasn't there prior to 1990. I had great respect for the Lindgrens and for Axel especially. I do understand that the construction of the trail, there were people who worked on that trail who may have some input in this regard who are still alive, know where the picket fence were. But I think it's very important to keep in mind, and this will just be my last comment, that the topography is not the same as now as it was when that picture showing the grave existed in 1890 when it was taken by Erickson. As we all know who lived around here for a while, that area has been graded to allow better access to Launching Beach, and it's difficult once you do that to get an idea of what it was like when that picture was taken. That's really all I have to say, except that I stand by my vote to close the trail based on what the Lindgren family told us. I see no reason that they would not be telling the truth about it, and I think they have reason to know that there is at least that one burial somewhere in the area, and we don't know where it is. And that was what my vote was based on. That's really all I have to say.
Thank you, Jim. Other questions or comments from the community?
Steve, this is Dick Bruce.
Go ahead, Dick.
My question is, did the council ever actually pass a resolution to close the trail? And if so, when was that passed? And maybe Jim can answer that question.
I'm sorry, Dick, what was the question again specifically?
Did the council ever actually pass a resolution to close the trail? And if so, when was that resolution passed?
Going back to my advanced age again, I can't tell you specifically, but I'm sure it's in the minutes and it wouldn't be difficult to find. There have been discussions about closing the Galindo Street Trail in the context of the Churai management meetings for some time, based on that original meeting that we had when we were trying to implement the management, the memorandum. That's one thing that was important to that particular council, was to initiate that with the Churai Ancestral Society, other members, the Yurok tribe, and so forth. That was unsuccessful in the long run, but it did provide for some good dialogue, and that was one of the first things that was brought up by the Native American contingent, both the Yurok tribe and the Ancestral Society, and that carried a lot of weight with me for the reasons I've just stated. But I can't tell you whether it was actually a resolution, but it certainly was something that was brought up and voted on, at least in terms of intent. That's all I can tell you regarding specifically what the vote was for.
And we as a city staff will dig up the past agendas and minutes and whatnot. But the fact remains that that we're discussing it tonight and looking for direction. Again, just to remind folks, tonight's goal for this agenda item is to vote on whether or not we're going to direct staff to begin exploring the permitting process and the request through the Coastal Commission and so on. So just wanted to provide that context. Other comments or questions from the community? Mr. Madrone. Oh, sorry. Who started speaking?
This is Jackie from Trinidad Rancheria.
Okay.
Jackie Hostler Carmison. I take exception to Mr. Kinney's comment regarding walking on graves. And I would like to support Councilwoman Sherry Provol in her comments. On behalf of Trinidad Rancheria, we did have discussions regarding the closure of the trail with the Yurok tribe, with Vice Chair Frankie Joe Myers. And there was no agreement that was reached. However, we're in agreement that we would be part of the process. Trinidad Rancheria owns the Harper properties, as you know. And so we were integrally involved in that process. But from the time I was a young girl and I married into an Indian family, I was taught that you do not walk on graves. So I take exception to the statement that is okay. There needs to be a lot of discussion and dialogue regarding the closure, and if the graves are there. I don't speak on behalf of the rancheria in that regard, but what I do know is that if there are graves there, it is not okay to be walking on graves. So I just needed to make that comment, and I do it in a spirit of being culturally sensitive. And I think that is a very important part that often is not honored and respected. So I appreciate Sherry's comments. I appreciate Jim Baker's comments. And I think respect is the biggest issue here on the closure of Galindo Trail. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Carmison Hostler. Other comments at this point or questions from the community? Mr. Kinney. You are on mute, sir.
Anybody who heard me realize that I did not say I'm in favor of walking on graves. I said, I think it's okay to walk in the vicinity of a grave. So I don't appreciate my words being twisted around like that, but it doesn't really surprise me. So just to correct the record there.
Any other comments regarding the direction of city staff to pursue the long process? And I do want to provide a little bit more context if I can, and then I promise I'll bring it back. But just as a point of clarification, what we're asking for here is to begin the process. The actual trail removal is not, the steps being taken is not a foregone conclusion. It's not just the city is going to go do this. I just want to be very clear that we will work closely supporting the Ancestral Society, the Rancheria, the folks, the Yurok tribe who have a vested interest in this trail removal for cultural reasons. And I just want to be very clear that what the city is working towards, if we do decide to, or if we do get permission rather to do this, that just to say that we're partners in this and that we're not driving this. So I just want to make sure that if we do look ahead a year from now, that's what we would be we would be engaged in. So at this point, I'll bring it back to public comment questions from the community. Mr. Baker.
I want to apologize if he thought that I was saying that it is okay to walk on graves, and I understood that that's not what he was saying. My contention is that we know there is at least one grave there. There's photographic evidence of that. We do not know where that grave is, the exact location. Therefore, you can't prove a negative. And so we don't know whether that trail is over the top of that grave or not, but I certainly was not accusing him of saying it was okay to walk on graves. I'm just saying we don't know where the grave is, except it was in that immediate vicinity, and we'll probably never know. That's all. That was my intent, Bryce, is all. I wasn't accusing you of saying it's okay to walk on graves.
Other comments? Looks like Mr. Madrone has his hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, another lively discussion. For those that don't know, I built that trail when I worked for RCAA. And it is absolutely true, as was stated, that Mr. Lindgren didn't fail in anything. He showed us where to build it to try and be sensitive to the likely location of the grave. It was not exactly known. He had to go to the doctor. When he left and then he came back, the crew had built the trail closer over to the sensitive area than he would have preferred. I asked if we should remove the trail. He said, no, the damage is already done. Let's not make more problems. But that was in 1990. And I would say I'm a very different person today in terms of being educated by local Native Americans about sensitivities to these kinds of issues. The city did not, when I went to build that trail for the city did not mention anything about any grave sites. They did ask us to have a cultural monitor, and it was good that that was the case. But I have been on record now for quite a few years in supporting the removal of this trail. And I support that because it goes through a highly sensitive cultural area. And whether it's 2 feet or 5 feet or 10 feet from the supposed grave, it is a sacred area. And if the local ancestors of that area would like us to respect that and remove it, I am in support of that. And I will volunteer my time to get a crew together under the Churai's supervision to remove that trail. Now, let's look at it from a practical point of view. Yes, it's a nice trail. I use it occasionally when I'm in town. But the vast majority of tourists and local residents go down Edwards to the beach. And so if that's a dangerous situation, that's where the majority of traffic's already going, and maybe we need to look at something to do there. At any rate, I don't think closing this really eliminates significant opportunities for people to get to the coast. And when you approach the Coastal Commission, I don't think it's so much of a asking of permission, well, do you think it'd be okay if we do this? It really is, we need to do this. This is a culturally sensitive site, and we need to do right by our local residents that represent this community of people and remove this trail. And you need to be very forceful and very clear with the commission in that, no, this needs to be removed for these reasons. And there is an alternative, and it is a good alternative down Edwards. And we will add some striping or stop signs or crosswalks if we need to make it safer. But I just want to go on record in supporting removal of this trail. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Madrone. I thought I saw an 845 number starting to talk. So I don't know if Sarah, was that you? I want to make sure we have time.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to say that the Tri Ancestral Society is in support of council recommending staff take necessary steps to speak with the commission about closing the trail. I would also like to say that I appreciate Steve Madrone's sentiment and his support as well about closing the trail. I think that because it goes over graves, because that's what the stories that are that Axel Lindgren II left for us. That I'm not going to question his integrity because that hasn't been necessary in any other situation. When he did a lot in Trinidad to try to educate and to help people and be able to live within the village, because the village is bigger than just the study area. And I think sometimes people forget that. The village boundaries, the traditional boundaries went way beyond the city limits, but everything within the city of Trinidad is within the Tri Village. And so, to that traditional knowledge that was passed down, there's a lot of culturally significant places that are not just limited to the study area. So I just wanted to remind people.
Thank you for those comments, Sarah. Other comments from the community at this point? We're getting close to calling a vote here. All right, seeing none, I want to make one closing comment, and then I'm going to ask the council to consider a vote on this, or a motion rather, and then a vote. Is that, Jack, it looks like you're raising your hand.
Yeah, I didn't get a chance to say something. I wanted to just add to, Jim had mentioned that we had already had a vote on this, and I don't remember an actual vote that we made. We had certainly, after our meetings with the Tri management team, we had certainly come in with the idea that we wanted to get to the Galindo Trail, and it kept getting put off because of other things. And I think this is not just important for us to do it, but it's because historically, as far as I can remember back, and even before, that this is something that needed to be done and was indicated we should be doing a long time ago. So there's very little question that it's time, no matter what, the graves or anything, they have requested this for years. And I think it's a really good time to say, absolutely now, let's get this done. Let's remove the trail, because just because of we need to respect what they want. So I'm glad we're getting this to this point. And I think it's a good time to move this on and do something about it.
Thank you, Jack. And I just wanted to sort of follow up on that. I just want to remind folks that it is rare that anyone questions someone's comment about a sacred site. It is sacred, and that is the end of it. And it's not for anyone to challenge whether or not a site is sacred. And so I feel very passionately about this. That we have a responsibility to follow through with real action. I made a vote, I believe, in 2017 to remove the trail, and here we are. 3 years later, the vote was to remove the trail, but the vote wasn't to direct staff with real actions and real timelines. And so that is what we are here to do tonight. So I'm bringing it back to the council now at this point. Looking for the staff recommendation is, I need to find the language here. Direct city staff to work with Coastal Commission staff and stakeholders to put together a proposal to close the Galindo Trail, which will eventually become become an application for a coastal development permit and an LCP amendment. Staff will provide updates and so on. So that's the recommendation before us. Do we have a motion in this regard?
I'll make a motion. Unless we don't have to read it again, right? You just.
No, please don't. And then I saw Richard's hand go up.
Yeah.
So we have a first and a second. Jack, were you raising your hand for comment? Okay. First and second.
I'd like to comment.
Go ahead, Tom. I can't see you, so.
Let me see if I can.
That's okay. I just couldn't see you.
No, I wasn't on. There we go. So I would like to entertain amending that to put together information for further discussion of this. Like was mentioned, there's been a lot of talk back and forth. I would like to see more information. And Jim Baker brought up a good point. I hope I remember it right, and I'm sure he'll correct me if I do not, that there is a right-of-way there, and we need to explore how that right-of-way could be used if indeed the Galindo Trail is closed, or how could it be rerouted within the right-of-way, etc. So I'd like to add those ideas into a motion.
So Dave, you have the ability to agree to that or not, and then Richard has to second that. So Dave.
Tom, did you happen to write that in the chat so Gabe can get it down?
I did not. I just was thinking, I was just trying to put it in words. So I would say.
You want to just do that, and I'll accept that. I know how you're going to write it. I mean,
I'll try.
Okay. Was basically to explore other options.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I agree to that.
Can the motion be to close the trail and explore other options? Or are you saying explore other options and not close the trail?
This directive added with the under they're gonna explore other options as well. It's kind of in there, but he's just wording it.
I would like to say direct city to explore options within the right-of-way before a proposal to close the trail.
Can you explain, Tom, what that means by right-of-way? Does that mean
There's
another trail, or what?
It's my understanding that there's a public access right-of-way from that bluff down to the park, down across the parking lot to the pier.
But how would you use that right-of-way without walking over that ancestral area?
Well, I don't know how wide the right-of-way is or exactly where it is, so I think it might be a thing to explore where this right-of-way is and explore maybe a way to work with the parties involved and try to see if the trail could be moved. Like during Steve's comments, Steve Madrone's comments, he said that Axel Lindgren told them where to put the trail so that it wouldn't be close to the sensitive area. So I would just like to know if we could explore how wide that right-of-way is, some options before we put together a proposal to actually close the trail. And I'd like to see all of the information that's been referred to in this meeting by past city councils.
So and Jim, I see your hand up, but we're in council comments right now. So hold tight. So the original motion was to direct city staff to pursue permits necessary to remove the Galindo Trail in its current state David, are you willing to amend your motion to include Tom's comments, which, as I understand it, is to not direct city staff to close the trail, to remove the Galindo Trail. Rather, it is to explore other areas within the right of way that could be used for that are suitable for a trail. Is that a fair?
That could be part of their proposal. So I don't know if that's necessary. You know what I mean? Like it's kind of in there. We're not telling them like it's how to close it might include an alternate route which has the right of way in it. So I don't unless he has specific wording that addresses the right of way, which I did like that part of it, that he was addressing the right of way part of it.
No, I just put something up there. Take a look at it. I don't know. I didn't have this written, nothing written before.
Right.
Just to add a quick clarification,
Down.
Go ahead, Trevor.
the things the Coastal Commission has said is that to close the trail, we would have to do an alternatives analysis. So that is something that we will be doing as part of this process.
Okay, so it is kind of included in the way it's directed now.
So that's built into the process, Trevor, and that Tom's comments are in essence already incorporated into the trail closure request process. Yes.
Yes, I think so.
Okay.
Well, I disagree with that because what it says is to put together a proposal to close the trail. So to put together information needed if closing the trail is voted upon. I would like more public comment about this. This is what I'm trying to get at, and that's why it's also on the Trails Committee agenda next Tuesday.
Richard, I've seen your hand go up a couple times. Do you have a perspective that you'd like to weigh in with?
Yeah, I understand that there may be a right of way, but if the trail is over sensitive archaeological areas or of importance to the Churai Ancestral Society, we have an alternative way to get down to the beach. It's the Edward Street, the boardwalk. This has been festering, I think, for a long time. And even though it may not be a short process to close the trail, I think that's the right thing to do for the city of Trinidad, for their neighbors and for the community. It's just a trail. It's not something that will negatively impact folks by not having it, but it will make other individuals and families a bit more comfortable that the community is more sensitive to their history.
I completely agree. But there's also, in my mind, a larger picture here. There are 3 trails in this town right now that are been closed and opened, or at least 2 that have been closed and opened arbitrarily. And to me, this also speaks to a bigger picture that trails are being closed without proper discussion, without proper permits. I'm not saying that I wouldn't vote to close this trail. I'm saying that I would like to see everything put out in front of us so that we can make a good decision. And that's why I put in from interested parties. That is from the Churai, that is from the UROC, that is from everybody, rather than just tonight's meeting directing. I just have a problem with this as proposal to close. So I would like to, maybe I should say, within the right of explore options.
I got it.
Go ahead.
The proposal to explore closing the Galindo Trail. A proposal to explore closing the Galindo Trail. That way it's still an open-ended thing. Then does that work for you? I'm just adding 2 words.
And I want to
changing the word close, adding 1 word and changing the word close to closing.
Maybe
and it should cover everybody, I think.
And I want to caution us on trying to come up with a proposal that is going, I mean, the voting process is for this. So if there's a motion to take an action, that motion needs to be voted on and not keep trying to amend the motion to get a 5-0 vote.
Right.
So I'm gonna bring this back as an order of business. I'm gonna bring it back to David.
Yeah. And
Make a motion.
I'm going to keep my motion to direct city staff to work with coastal commission staff and stakeholders to put together a proposal to close down Galinda Trail, which will eventually become the application for CDP and LCP amendment. Staff will provide regular updates at future council meetings. And that's
So that's the motion. Richard, you had second the motion.
Second.
Do you still second that motion? So now we have a motion with a first and second, and I'm going to call for a vote. And Gabe, just because I don't want there to be any confusion here, can you call the roll so that we can vote?
You got it. Okay, so you've got a motion and a second on the table. I'm calling for a full roll vote. Mayor Ladwig?
I vote yes.
Okay. Davies?
No.
Councilmember Grover?
Yes.
Councilmember Klompus?
Yes.
And Councilmember West?
Yes.
That is 4 yes and 1 no. Councilmember Davies voting no.
Thank you for that. And again, I want to just remind the council that while I appreciate wordsmithing a motion, we also need to go with the motion and see it through with a vote and not keep wordsmithing it until we have a 5-0 vote. I also want to remind everybody that we are directing city staff to pursue this, and that we have not, in essence, closed the trail. The trail is open. If you want to walk it tomorrow, you're able to walk it tomorrow. So thank you for that discussion.
I'd like to make one closing comment, please.
Yes, sir.
So like I said earlier, this is not to say that I would not vote to close this trail, but I have a problem with staff giving one option and us having to feel like your comments were just directed, we'll just take the staff recommendation. We don't want to wordsmith things. So in the future, perhaps staff could come up with a couple different options rather than the one that they might like the best or something else, because there's always a counter side. And in the matter of fact, in many municipalities, there's more than one staff action to look at and adopt.
That is a good idea moving forward. Thank you for that.
Which was really my point in trying to wordsmith the motion.
Thank you for that. Moving on to item number 3, update discussion regarding the ASBS stormwater project. I believe Eli has an update for this. I'm trying to see.
Yeah, I'm going to ask if Patrick Sullivan is still on the line.
Yeah, I'm still on the line.
Okay, because you're part of the stormwater project with Steve.
That's correct. With preliminary design, I haven't worked on that in the recent past. I'm not prepared to discuss this.
Okay. So this is just to give you an update. So the update that we have is that we had a meeting with the Rancheria. It was it was on the 4th. So yeah, it was a week ago. And we were talking about the mutual projects for stormwater. The city has a stormwater project planned for next summer, and the Rancheria has a stormwater project planned for next summer. So we talked about both projects and how they could work together. Currently, we have what's referred to as Plan A, and Plan A would have the infiltration gallery built down in the harbor area, partly on city property and city right-of-way, and partly on the rancherias area in the harbor. What we have also come up with from that meeting is that a Plan B will also be drawn and presented to the rancheria and to the council, which will show that we could do the whole infiltration gallery within the city right-of-way. Either way, we need to keep this process going, just like the Van Wyck process. So we need to, within the next month or so, keep moving and have plans drawn, and then have that eventually go to the respective granting agencies, which are going to be providing the funding, and to meet their deadlines so that we don't miss that. So that's basically the update that I have.
Thank you, Eli. And I just want to comment on how much I appreciate, from a city council perspective, I'm not an expert. None of us are experts in water, and I really appreciate the staff, the engineers, the planners from both the rancheria and the city coming together to review some of the specifics on this project and to make sure that we're really making it the most efficient, the most useful for both entities as possible. So I really appreciate that meeting last week that brought the minds together to continue to work on this project. So at this point, Eli, are you looking for any kind of further information or direction from the council on this topic?
No, we just wanted to give you an update, and if there are any questions or comments that either the council or the public have, I will try to answer them. If not, I will direct them to Steve Allen and Josh. To Steve Allen when he comes back from his vacation next week. Since, as Patrick said, Steve was directly at that meeting and talked about Plan A and Plan B. So I'll entertain any questions that I can.
Any questions for Eli? And I can't see the other half of the screen. Doesn't look like it. Okay, well, thank you very much for that update.
No sound, Steve.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Eli. And just to let folks know that, let's see, that we are going to have a busy summer next summer. So thanks for that update. And as we continue to move forward, keeping up with deadlines, we'll keep looking for updates at future city council meetings. At this point, we'll move to number 4, continued discussion decision regarding government-to-government meeting policy. I'm going to turn it back over to Eli.
Okay, so this was addressed at the last council meeting in July, and questions were raised regarding the impact of the Brown Act on the government-to-government meetings. So it was requested that I bring back information regarding that. So I had prepared a staff report based upon input that I got from 2 attorneys. It was suggested that I get a couple attorneys' viewpoints. So we do have our regular city attorney, Andy Stunich, and then the other attorney is Russ Gaines. Russ Gaines represents the cities of Blue Lake, Ferndale, and Rio Dell. And as a result, because of Blue Lake, is involved also with their rancheria. And of course, Andy has been involved with our rancheria. And so we were talking about the government-to-government meetings there, but we also have had government-to-government meetings with the Yurok tribe. And that's something that, we will be continuing and would like to continue. So basically, the research is showing what's called the advisory committee / ad hoc committee. That is when you have less than a quorum, meaning no more than 2 council members. And you also do not have what's called a continuing scope of business. So the example that was given, for instance, in a letter that was prepared by Bryce Kinney, he referred to a Parks and Recreation committee. That is a standing committee. When you do have a Parks and Recreation committee, it's like our Trails Committee and like the STR committee. They have only that focus, Parks and Recreation or Trails or STR. They don't consider any other issues. That's why you would have that standing committee. In addition to that, they also have a regular meeting schedule, such as the STR, they meet quarterly, such as the Trails Committee, they meet monthly. So in the case of the government-to-government meetings, we do not have a regular meeting schedule. And we also deal with a variety of topics. We don't have one specific topic. So basically, whenever there's that either the city or a tribe, meaning the Rancheria or the Yurok tribe, if they feel, if the city feels, or if one of those entities feels like, hey, we need a meeting, we'd like to talk about stormwater, then we just go ahead and we schedule that meeting. So it's just random. And then also the topic is random. It's like, okay, we need to talk about stormwater. So as a result, it doesn't fall under the standing committee the standing committee example that's given in the Brown Act. In my staff report, I referred to Kim Tays had brought the First Amendment Coalition to my attention. It just happened that I had also seen the First Amendment Coalition on their website. And they have what's titled the Open Government Laws, a Brown Act Primer. In there, they address advisory committees composed solely of the members of the legislative body that constitute less than a quorum and that have neither a continuing scope of business nor a schedule set by the legislative body are not covered by the Brown Act. In addition to that, in November 2005, a document was prepared by the California Governor's Office of Planning and Research. It's titled Tribal Consultation Guidelines. In the Tribal Consultation Guidelines, it states, should a local legislative body participate in confidential tribal consultations, it's important that they do so as an advisory committee with less than a quorum, so as to not invoke the Brown Act requirements of public participation. And then the other part of it, out of that same document, it says, in order to efficiently conduct tribal consultation meetings, in addition to maintaining confidentiality at all times, local governments are encouraged to develop procedures in advance that would designate a committee or agency in charge. So basically, what we're referring to in this document, I also point out in my staff report, several cities that I've worked in, it was common to have what they call a 2x2 committee, whereby 2 representatives of that body meet with 2 representatives of another body for discussions. Subsequently, any actions would be brought forth to the whole body of each of those agencies. And I give an example. As city manager in Crescent City, which is the only incorporated city in Del Norte County, frequently we had 2x2s between the city and the county. We talked about a variety of different topics. One was regarding incorporation, others regarding mutual ability to use services, where maybe we would contract with the county to use some of their services, or maybe they might contract with us to use some of our services. And in Crescent City, we had the swimming pool, but the county had some other potential things that they had to offer. So frequently, these 2x2s were held. And occasionally, meaning annually, we would try to get the whole city council and the whole board of supervisors, in that case, to meet and basically enact whatever motions they want to do. And that was done in public in a large setting. So basically, that's the path that I feel would be the most conducive. And that's the path that the city has followed in past years, where we've had less than a quorum of the city council meeting. Now, it is important that we report out, and I have that from our prior meeting, which I indicated that the G to G, which is my short reference for government to government, meetings of less than a quorum, where there's no binding actions can be taken, that then the agenda for the upcoming G to G meetings will be provided to the whole council in advance. All topics discussed at the G to G meeting need to be reported out at the next city council meeting. This creates more transparency for the council and the citizens. And if any actions need to be taken stemming from the discussions of the G to G meeting, those actions will be addressed at a city council meeting, because only a quorum, a majority of the city council can bind the city. A advisory committee or ad hoc committee of only up to 2 council members cannot bind the city, cannot make any deals for the city. They can discuss things, but it needs to be brought forward in a public setting. So that's basically what I have regarding the Brown Act. And like I said, I also got the opinion from both attorneys, in addition to the research and past examples that I've experienced in other cities. So I'll turn it over to the council and entertain any questions you might have.
Thank you, Eli. I also wanted to remind folks that we discussed at our last council meeting the notion that we're gonna, that there's a lot more interest from the council to be part of these efforts. And so it's not simply the mayor pro tem and the mayor who participate, so that it's an ongoing sort of rotation, so that all council members have access to this sort of activity. So I just want to add that as one more piece of the discussion that we had last week. So based on the new information that Eli has updated us with, do we have any questions or comments from the council at this point? Go ahead, Richard.
Yeah, I think that this reference is well written. Certainly, I would like to volunteer to be a part of this process, to meet and contribute to hopefully being able to come to some actions and agreements on that process.
Thank you. Other comments or questions from the council? Jack?
I'd like to add that these meetings have been very beneficial to the city, because we are meeting with at least with the Rancheria and the Yurok on their lands and their areas, which makes it, I think, convenient to get information. And we don't make decisions, but we can come back to the council with this information. And I think this is a way that allows the city to work with the tribes in a much better way than trying to make it an open where it's difficult to get together. So this has worked well, and I think since I've been on this, I realized that we're coming back with important information on a regular basis. And as Eli said, we go from there's many different ideas that come up. And I think this is really important that we can do this, not only with the Rancheria, but also this is going to be important to work with the Yurok tribe, being able to travel to the Yurok tribe and be able to come back with information that is important and essential, I think, for the city. And if we don't do this kind of if we don't go there and get this information, I think we're going to be left out of a lot of information I think is very important. So I think this has been an important part of what we have done as a city. And I think it's been not only essential, but I think we're doing it in a good way. I think the big thing that we have to work on is making sure we report completely what we're talking about in order to get that back to the council clearly. And I think there's been times when that may not have been as good as it should have been in terms of bringing information back. But if we bring it back, I think it is the best way to get in touch with the tribes and get information that's important to the city of Trinidad.
Thank you, Jack. Other questions or comments from the council?
I have Tom Davies has some comments.
Go ahead, Tom.
So my first comment is that the attached policy does not have any of the, it's the exact same thing that was presented last month. And there were some ideas brought forth that if we were going to even entertain this, that should be changed, such as agenda provided to the public. Public, once again, has been left out. It's just provided to the council. This is still not a policy. This is 4 bullet points. And I was reading at this during, reading the staff report. I read some of these documents that were cited, and the bulk of the documents, especially the 2005 report, relates to government meetings as they relate to SB 18, which is, in my understanding, about cultural significant areas and items of cultural significance, and amendments to plans or generation of general plan, etc. So I do not have any problem with government meetings with, regarding the SB 18 requirements. But what I believe has happened is that you're using these government meetings to discuss a pure business deal, i.e. water, as illustrated by the city manager's comments during a past meeting, that we need to keep the Hyatt's business dealings and their proprietary information confidential. That does not jive with SB 18. That is not a cultural significant item. It may be culturally significant to the Hyatt, which is a multinational corporation. So government meetings have a place. I understand that. Discussing a business item is not the place. So any policy that we develop, I believe, has to have that item in the policy. And once again, I don't see what's in front of us is a policy. So those are my comments.
Thank you, Tom. And I believe the recommendation tonight is to continue to develop this policy. So I agree that the policy in the packet, while the part of it is the same as what we had last month, what the addition is the comments from lawyers and that Eli has reached out to. So I agree that this is still a work in progress. But other questions or comments from the council? All right.
So I have just add on. So our city attorney stated that continuing to talk about things, in a multiple fashion could be a problem. I think that repeated or regularly scheduled meetings with council members are going to run into problems. Much will depend on what happens at the meetings and how the information shared is passed along or utilized. So the city manager forwarded just since April of 19 to present, out of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 meetings, the word water has come up 5 times. Water production rate memo, watershed analysis, water study memos, hotel water project, water service for hotel. None of those are SB 18 items. That's the rest of my comment.
Okay. Sorry, Tom, your connection is, for me, is spotty. So thank you for letting me know. Other questions, comments? Let's move this to public comment. Anyone from the public wish to ask questions or make comments? Go ahead, Ms. Provolt.
I don't know.
You were unmuted, Sherry. There you go.
Okay. I think my internet's starting to kind of slow down here. It must be getting late. Reaction time. But, I encourage, development of policy. I agree that there's much work yet to do on this policy. And I want the city council to think broader than just tribal governments. I know that you might need to have a government to government with the county. You might need to have government to government with various other different water districts or whatever, so I think you have to think broadly on developing a policy and what are those other government entities that you work with and how should that be laid out so that you're transparent. It's really important that we do that, be transparent to our community. And then again, have it on the regular next council meeting that you have, that you report out the discussion. So that was my comment. I think it still needs to be worked on some more, and I appreciate that the city council is looking at this. And to think about broadly, what are those government to government discussions that you want to have? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Other comments? Mr. Kenny.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I wrote another letter to you about the Brown Act. And I understand the governments have to communicate with each other. But you're never going to have a real government to government meeting unless it's done in the open, under California law. You can have committee meetings with other government entities, and then the question becomes whether it's an ad hoc committee, which is not covered by the Brown Act, or whether it's a standing committee, which is covered by the Brown Act. And the reason I think that you're what's now being called the executive committee is a standing committee is because it has been in existence a long time and will continue to be in existence for a long time because the city and the tribes and the other government entities are going to be around for a long time. An ad hoc committee is one single issue, but the scheduling of the time of the sequence of the meetings is not the controlling factor when you have a common denominator that comes up in the tribal meetings is that these are all issues that are concerned to the tribe and the city council. So it's not, if the Trails Committee, that's a standing committee. Now they talk about all kinds of different trails, not just one trail. So that doesn't turn it from a standing committee into an ad hoc committee. The your Churai management team, that was the origin of what's now being called the executive committee. And you're on record, we've got references in my letter, with statements that this has to be done out in the public. This should not be a secret meeting. So that's really what you have to decide here is whether you're in favor of open meetings or secret meetings. Either way, you can have you're going to have the meetings with just two of you. Obviously, it's not you can't bind the city council with an official decision on your own, but why not let the public in on this process? Let a little sunshine in, like they say with the sunshine laws. The consultations, that's something that's defined by law, as Tom Davies said. If it's a sequel issue or if it's amending your general plan that might affect tribal or Native American issues, then you can have confidential consultations. Your letter from your city attorney says, there's likely to be problems if you continue to have these meetings in private. So, I mean, I don't exactly see that as a ringing endorsement of what you've been doing. So if you believe in open government, you should go on the side of open government if it's a close question. Might be one way, it might be the other. The safe thing to do is make it open to the public. That's what I hope you do. If you want to be in compliance with California law, I think that's what you should do.
Steve, I'd like to answer one point that was made by Bryce, and that is as far as his example of the Trails Committee, because standing committees exist and make routine and regular recommendations on what they say specific subject matter. So the Trails Committee, yes, they do talk about different trails, but they only deal with one specific subject matter, and that is trails. Versus our meetings deal with a variety of subject matters, whatever might exist, whether it's the fee to trust for the harbor, whether it's the stormwater projects, whether it's water for the hotel, whether it's whatever future development we might have there, maybe like, whether Scenic Drive needs to be widened or improved, or the intersection where Main meets Scenic, the interchange there, whether that needs improvements. So it's not one particular subject matter, it's a variety of subject matters. And then the other point regarding standing committees is they did say they have a regular meeting schedule, meaning they meet once a month or once a quarter or whatever. Versus this is just like random. Whenever, something comes up, it's like, hey, we need to talk about this, let's schedule a meeting. So that's why I felt that, it actually works well that way, but we need to report out, more so in more detail, and the idea of having the agenda out to the public and to the council in advance. And in addition to that, what Mayor Steve had suggested regarding because there is interest, like Richard expressed an interest, and we've gotten interest from more of the council members who said they would like to be part of the process. So in other words, we shouldn't just have the two, mayor and the mayor pro tem. We should open this up where the council could say, hey, look, we want to have this ad hoc committee meet on a specific topic, and who wants to volunteer for that. And then once we get done with that, then we can have another ad hoc committee meet with either the same group, the Rancheria or the UROC, and about maybe a different subject matter, so that this way, we can keep it moving around and not just have the same two people meeting. So that'll give the whole council more of an opportunity. And then eventually, it all has to come back to the council anyway. So I think that is a viable solution.
Go ahead, Michelle.
Steve, it's my turn here.
Let's stick with the public, and then we'll come back to you, Jack.
Okay, I wanted to clarify something. If that's all right.
Okay.
It has to do with Bryce mentioning the Turai Society, the meetings with the Turai management team, and that was what that was written about. Not really the government to government meetings. I want to separate the Turai management team from the government to government meetings, because those were two separate issues. And what our attorney was writing about was the questions about the Turai management team and the way we were meeting. And we all had questions about that. In fact, we had brought that up at another time, and I think Bryce referenced that we have some concerns about whether we should open the Turai management team to the public, because it wasn't considered as the standard kind of government to government meeting. So the Turai management team that you were writing about was a separate issue that Andy wrote about from the government to government. One didn't lead to the other. The government to government meetings have been going on before that, and the Turai management team was separate kind of a grouping, and we got very concerned whether that was a proper way of running that, or that should have become public because of what we were doing. So we brought that up as a concern, but that concern was not due to the government-to-government meetings, which were a separate issue altogether. And I don't believe Andy was writing about the government-to-government meetings in that memo.
Thank you, Jack. Sherry, you had your hand up. You're muted, Sherry. There you go. Oh, you're muted again.
How am I now?
Now you're good.
Okay, thank you. I think all efforts should be to have open meetings. Recently, the York Tribe had a meeting with the County Board of Supervisors in Del Norte. And it was an open meeting. And I think in all efforts, we want to try to have that as much as possible. But I think that there should be respect if there's a time that, something is such that we feel like we want to have a closed session or a discussion privately. I think that should be respected, but we're in support. The York Tribe is in support of having open meetings as much as possible. But there are times when certain things would like to be talked about privately before bringing it out. About talking with the full community. So I just wanted to let Bryce know. I think that having open meetings is a really good way to do that transparency. But there are some times that you might want to have a closed session. Because of the issue. And so we do support that as the York Tribe having open sessions as much as possible.
Thank you. Other comments from the public? All right, I'm going to bring it back to the council. Again, our task tonight is to give direction to city staff on continuing to develop.
Hello, this is Richard Harris. Can you hear me?
Oh, yes, Richard.
Thank you. A couple of points that were covered in Rice's letter today. You are a state legislative body, and your standing committees are legislative bodies, and that's covered not only by the Brown Act, but by the Constitution. And Bryce's letter cites the Constitution. Constitution Act 1, Section 3, which says that the importance of open meetings is central to the people's business. And if there is any close question, any exception to that is to be construed narrowly, and anything encouraging public meetings is to be construed broadly. And so what you have with the example of the Attorney General's example of the Rec and Park Commission, that's a broad topic, and it has swimming pools and children's playgrounds and hiking trails and golf courses. But there is a single a continuing subject matter, which is the way that the Brown Act refers to it. It's continuing subject matter. The subject matter of relations with the Indian tribes. You have a specific committee that's shown in your 2019 list of committees that is for relations with the Indian tribes. And there's certain expertise that those members have developed, and that's who's on that committee. And that's who has been conducting these public meetings, same members. And you have it identified as a committee. Well, that needs to be those meetings, and that's what Attorney Stunich has told you twice in 2018, in February 2018, and in the unsigned letter that was submitted to you for this meeting, in which he concludes that you can send staff, but when you have council members attending secret meetings, that's the problem with the Brown Act. And he's advised you twice not to do that. And that advice has been public. And so it creates a problem to the legitimacy of the results. So to best protect the legitimacy of what happens, they need to be public meetings. Now, as Ms. Provost said, there are occasions dealing with Indian tribes, and we were just discussing some of that earlier with respect to the trails, where you have cultural and other things that require confidentiality. And there are specific statutes that deal with that. That kind of confidentiality, that's fine. And what Sunix told you in February of 2018 was, where that issue arises, then announce it and say, yeah, this meeting's going to be about a confidential matter, and so it can't be a public meeting, or go into some kind of session that would be an equivalent to an executive session. And that was what Stunich's suggestion was in his letter in February of 2018. And with respect to this one, what he says is he gave you in the letter that you got today, he says, if you're not complying with the Brown Act, there are going to be problems. If you have something specific, come back to me. Now, Eli is not a lawyer. You've got a lawyer for lawyers' business. And I respectfully suggest that you take his advice on this. Because if you don't, the whole process is going to be subject to this same argument. And it has great support in the California Constitution and in the way of doing things in California legislative bodies, of which you are one. So with that respectfully said, I agree with Ms. Provost that these meetings should be open and public to the greatest extent possible. And your own attorney has told you that twice. Thank you very much, guys. I submit that.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Other public comment at this point from the community? So what I'm hearing is that we are directing city staff to continue to develop this policy and to include language that really establishes when a government-to-government meeting is appropriate and when an open meeting is appropriate. Is that a fair assessment, counselors, to what we're hearing tonight based on public comment and information presented in the packet?
Yeah.
Yes, I recommend that we proceed with caution with future meetings until we figure out what's the best framework.
Okay. And Mr. Davies, I see a warning signal on your window, like you may have bad internet. So I don't know if you're able to, I just don't want to leave you out due to technical problems.
I can hear you. I can hear
Okay.
you. Thanks.
Yeah, I saw the warning signal. I don't know what it means. So
Yeah, I'm going back and forth. I got the phone going too, so we're good. Thanks.
okay. Any other comments then from the council on direction for the city staff to continue on this project?
Not really, I mean.
Okay, thank you very much for the discussion. I now am turning it over to Mr. Klompus, who has sort of prepared, not sort of, who has prepared some discussion items for number 5, the discussion decision to direct staff to prepare amendment to section 3.20.100 of the Trinidad Code, audit occupancy tax records of Trinidad lodging establishments. Mr. Klompus, I turn it over to you, and I am going to step out for a very brief moment, but I will still be able to hear.
Great. Can everyone see the first slide I have up, the discussion to direct staff?
I do.
You see it?
Yes.
Perfect, thank you. So I'm going to go through this. We're going to come back to this title slide because the motion I'm going to make at the end for review and discussion is going to be about having the staff prepare an amendment. And I'm going to give you just a very quick history. All this work that we do goes back to really 1 square mile of land, the city of Trinidad, and about 350 residents. And because it's such a beautiful area, we have lots of tourists every year. When you look at our general fund for revenue, the highest category, which makes up about 1/5 of the town's revenue every year, is called the tourist occupancy tax, also called the transient occupancy tax, or TOT. So any given year could be 19%, 20%. This year, because of COVID, it's a bit reduced, but it's a very important tax that the city requires to pay for a number of different activities and responsibilities that we have as a city. When you look at the TOT ordinance, each operator of short-term rentals, bed and breakfast, must keep their records for a period of 5 years. And the very last line that I've highlighted says the tax administrator shall have the right to inspect at all reasonable times these records to make sure that the operators are paying their taxes as they should. They're paid each quarter. When I asked the question about what type of audit history has there been in Trinidad, there really aren't any records that I could find of any audits performed by the city to review compliance with the TOT ordinance. And again, the reason I bring this up is because I don't feel anyone has been dishonest, but I want to make sure that the ordinance we have has language that would direct how an audit might be done. And in order to do that, the state of California has published a reference manual for the tourist occupancy tax. They published it back in 2012. And it consists of simply 2 paragraphs. One is the purpose and performance of an audit, of when to perform an audit, or the purpose, pardon me. And the second paragraph is about when to perform it. Anytime the tax collector believes an operator might be underreporting or there's a change in ownership, the state uses the word hotel to indicate any short-term rental, bed and breakfast, that type of thing. But I think the most important 2 sentences in the audit section is that operators should be aware that they're subject to audit, and this will help promote compliance and correct reporting, even without doing an audit. So the state reference manual includes these 2 paragraphs about an audit to make it clear where our current ordinance really kind of leaves it perhaps up to the imagination. So what I did was simply look at the actual text that the state has provided for counties and changed it so it would apply to a city instead of a county. But essentially the words and everything follows in line with what the state has recommended in their reference manual. So it's a very small change. And again, I'm not promoting that the city should do an audit this year, next year. I just want the short-term rental operators to understand clarity that there could be an audit, and hopefully that will help promote compliance and correct reporting. So it's a rather simple change. It's a small change, the process would work that the council would vote to have the staff direct this in the proper language. It would have to be brought back next month to the council meeting. It would have to be read. It would have to then be published in the paper to get public comment. Next month, it would have to be read again. And then finally, after receiving all the public comment, the council could vote to incorporate this and modify their municipal code to include the section on audits, about the potential for an audit. And if an audit were to be done, this is the process. So what I wanted to bring to the council today was a small modification that would have to go through the process of approval. But the very first step is having the staff write it up in the proper legal format so that it could be brought back to council. Council could then examine it and decide to go through the process, the gauntlet, so to speak, the multi-month process of having it approved that would then modify our municipal code. So that's really what I had to say. Steve, I want to turn this, Mr. Mayor, back to you to see how we can have discussion or whether or not we want to proceed with directing staff to prepare an amendment.
And actually, Richard, I'm going to turn it back to you because this deals with TOT and audits. And I am a vacation rental owner. I'm going to recuse myself. I meant to do that before I had to step out for a biology break. But I'm going to turn it back to you and you can lead the discussion.
Sure. Okay. So I wonder if I can see everybody here. If there's anybody that is it proper to have discussion first with the council or first with the public?
However you want to lead it, just so that you get everybody's comment. And I know I'm doing a lousy job of recusing myself, but I suggest not sharing your screen anymore so that you can see all the individual members.
All right, let me do that. And let's see how I can, how do I stop sharing screen?
For me, when I mouse over the screen at the bottom, there's the little share content icon. If you click on it again, it should stop sharing.
Perfect. How's that? Okay, I'd like to open this up to public comment if I may. And Mr. Mayor, thank you for your guidance on the process. Does anybody have a comment? If they could just unmute and anybody? Again, I'll ask for public comment first. I don't see any hands. So without public comment, I'd like to open this up to comment from the council members.
Richard, I have a comment.
Yes.
Okay, I just think this is I'm very impressive, very nicely done. I think that we really are supposed to be going back over this STR ordinance and looking at it. I think this might be something that we could consider. Now you're talking about a policy, and so the ordinance, it was supposed to be looked at after 2 years. So this may be a good starting point to actually go back over the STR ordinance. I don't know if we want to go that far. That would give us an opportunity to revisit and see if we could have that completed, because we really want to have it set to go. It'd be nice to have this all set to go by the end of the year, if possible. But I put that out to the rest of the council too, if we want to try to review the STR ordinance, see how this would fit in.
This is Eli. I'd like to weigh in. Yes, that was my first initial reaction, Jack, was the STR ordinance. However, when I looked into it, there's actually a separate TOT, Transit Occupancy Tax ordinance, that's part of the municipal code. So what Richard is proposing here is to make this change in the transient occupancy tax ordinance portion of the municipal code, which will cover all lodging establishments, anyone who contributes TOT to the city.
Thank you.
I think it's a great idea. I would prepare to put forward a motion if you would like me to entertain a motion. It seems like a logical thing to do if we have people collecting monies that are on behalf of city, then there should be some kind of accountability for collecting that money and passing it to the city. So I think this is timely and an excellent idea. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's a really good idea too, Richard, and I'm gonna support. I don't know if Tom said he had a motion already, but if he doesn't, I'll make one.
Yeah.
Because it sounds like something that's overdue actually, because these policies an evolving process, and I like to see that. It's really good to keep us moving forward and keep up with the other cities and the way their ordinances go. It's just easier to enforce the way you're wording it in my perspective, at least.
Thank you. Any other comment from council members? So if someone would like to make a motion, what I'm asking for essentially is to direct the staff to prepare the amendment, and they will then bring it back to the council where we can begin that process of public comment, evaluating it, and then eventually hopefully passing it and making it part of the municipal code. So
I'm putting something in the chat right now. Bear with me. Oops. Sorry, I keep making typos.
I notice that when people don't mute their mic when they
You can hear me typing, huh? Like a little mouse running around.
yeah. Wait.
This isn't the best worded motion, but so I'm open to if somebody wants to help me make this sound. All right, let's just give it a shot with that. This is not my most proud moment here, but.
Okay. To prepare an amendment to the TOT municipal code.
Yeah, I like that. A couple words.
Yeah, I can make a motion then. I'd like to make a motion that we direct staff to prepare an amendment to the TOT municipal code to give the city authority to perform audits of STR hotels, et cetera, regarding TOTs.
TOT collection or something.
That's good. I'll second that.
Okay.
And can we, I guess, do a voice vote? It's
I think,
Jack does that, or?
no, yeah, we can just go ahead and all in favor, and we can just put up hands, I think. And
Aye.
and Tom's got two. That's 4-0. So that passes.
okay. Well, thank
You
you.
got all that, Gabe? You okay with everything?
I got it all. Yes, thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you very much.
We can bring Steve back now.
Okay. Now back to Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank you very much for taking that. Sherry, did you have a hand up there? Go ahead and unmute yourself. Perfect.
I did, and thank you. Just for a community member living in the area, when you have an ordinance change or proposed change to an ordinance, do you have public hearings on that once you draft the language? Okay. All right. That's it. Thank you.
What we do, Sherry, is we do a first reading, a second reading, and then it goes through. So it'll come to at least 2 meetings when we change an ordinance.
And are they titled public hearings around an ordinance so that your community knows that it's a public hearing or a hearing around an ordinance change?
What it'll say is in the agenda, there'll be the first reading of amendment to ordinance 2019 dash whatever.
Okay.
That way everybody knows what we're talking about.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
Unless there's a special meeting, then we would have a titled hearing one.
Yeah, if we had to have a second meeting in the month or something like that, because the agenda was packed in the first meeting. But speaking of packed agenda, we are nearing the end of this one. At this point, we have time for a November election update and upcoming deadlines. There was something in our packet regarding this, but Gabe, I believe this is for you to give us the latest and greatest.
Yeah, okay. Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I guess you could say we're rounding second in the election process. Just finished the candidate nomination period, and we have, we have 4 candidates. We have 2 candidates running for the 2 4-year terms, and those are our 2 incumbents, Mr. Mayor Ladwig and Councilmember West, and we have 2 candidates running for the 2-year contest, Councilmember Grover as the incumbent and another resident in the community, Mike Morgan. The candidacy period has closed because incumbents have filed for those positions, and that's pretty much what seals the deal. If no incumbents had filed, then the candidacy period would have been extended 5 days. So the period is closed. As far as I know, so far, 3 out of the 4 candidates all have had an A+ on their nomination signatures that they received. The 4th, the resident who's not an incumbent, we're waiting on his signatures to be certified by the county. So that said, regarding that's pretty much it for the candidacy period. Those are the names, pending the signatures are correct for the 4th and final candidate. Those are the names that'll be showing up on the ballot this November. And then as far as the sales tax election is concerned, an update on that, City Manager Eli Naffa and Councilmember Dave Grover and I have been working on just crafting the argument for the measure. The deadline for that is tomorrow. That argument will be included in the in the voter information pamphlet. I have no indication of any other letters for or against the sales tax measure will be submitted or not. So tomorrow's the deadline for that process. After that, I guess you'd say that's when we round third and headed for the election. There really isn't any other deadlines. There will be a period of time, a short window of about a week where arguments, once tomorrow's deadline is passed, there'll be a period of time where arguments for or against the arguments for or against the measure will be sort of publicized and folks, anybody who disagrees with the argument written, let's just say in favor of the measure, will be able to provide a rebuttal. But I don't want to speak too soon, but I'm not hearing a lot of chatter in the community about wanting to meet that deadline. So that said, we're getting closer to putting this behind us and then just sort of riding it out till the election. And that is all I wanted to add to this discussion. And if anybody has any questions, now's the time.
Questions for Mr. Adams? Thank you for that summary. Oh, did I hear a question or a comment? No? All right, thank you very much for that update. I like your analogy. We're rounding second on our way to third. As in the packet, you mentioned that November 8th is the election. I think it's the 3rd this year, but I'm sure we'll hear a little bit about it between now and then.
Yeah.
All right, well, that concludes our regular discussion items. At this point, I'm going to ask for future agenda items and then remind the council that we get to stick around for a closed session. So any future agenda items, let's start, excuse me, from the public. Any future agenda items that you are interested in us entertaining at this point? All right, seeing none, council members, future agenda items? Other than the stuff that we've given quite a bit of direction to city staff, so don't feel like we need to repeat that. All right, no more city council meetings for the year because there's no agenda items coming. Anyway, thank you very much for, Eli, do you want to?
Yes, so we're going to be ending the meeting now, but we'll be going into closed session. So Gabe is going to end this meeting and he's going to send you a new link for the council for the closed session. So look for the new link and we'll start a new meeting for the closed session.
Okay. This is adjourned then?
Muted, Steve.
Eli, the new link will be in our city email?
Yes.
Okay. Well, that concludes tonight's regular meeting. Thank you very much for your participation, and we will see you again in September. Bye-bye.